Okay, good evening, everyone. We're all set to go on the committee of the whole meeting for this evening, June 5th, 2023. And I will call our meeting to order, and we will start with our land acknowledgement, and we will go to Vice Chair Doherty, if you're okay with that. Okay.
Thank you. I just got to scroll back to it.
Yep.
Thank you. For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who were families, friends, and communities the way we are today. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and the relationship it establishes with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history and the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community. We seek to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better and to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation.
Thank you very much. So that brings us to the adoption of the agenda. And we have a couple of amendments that I will read out that were circulated, and we've had a further request, which I will list as well. So the motion is that the content of the Committee of the Whole agenda for June 5th, 2023 be adopted as amended. Addition of staff report CCS 2023-3, Memorandum of Understanding Grain Terminals Revitalization Project. Addition of staff report CAO 2023-7, Strategic Planning and Downtown Plan Next Steps. And number 3 is a request to add 6.3, an additional departmental update by Director Salama regarding the on-demand bus service. So I would ask for a mover and a seconder, Councillor Baines, Vice Chair Doherty. Any further comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? I see Councillor Perry. Thank you. And that is carried. Carried unanimously, I think. So just to acknowledge for the public, we do have Councillor Perry virtually joining us. And I believe also Mayor Hamlin may be able to hear us.
I am here, Madam Chair. For whatever reason, I'm not able to show a video of myself, but I am here listening intently, and I will vote. Thank you.
Great. I'll be listening for the eye, or the clerk will confirm for me that you voted. Thank you. All right. So we've confirmed that. And so just before we proceed, I'll also, we're going to move something a little around. We will start once we get to it, to the registered deputation. And once we get there, following into staff reports, we're going to begin with 5.4 because I know many of the people in our gallery tonight are interested in that specific item. So we'll get that moved up that we can. All right. So then we have number 3, which is declarations of pecuniary interest. Is there any declarations of pecuniary interest? I'm seeing none, so we know that you will bring it to my attention if something arises for you. So then that brings us to number 4, deputations, and we're pleased to welcome from the Institute of South Georgian Bay, Rosalyn Morrison. Ros, going forward.
Hello, everyone. I am Rosalyn Morrison, the volunteer chair for the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay. And our request today is for you to consider joining us as a lead program partner so that we can collaborate on developing a program for this year around the pressing issues that we are experiencing in our region, as well as some of the exciting opportunities coming up. The lead collaborative partner request is in the amount of $10,000. For some of you, you might not be familiar with the background of the Institute, so I'll quickly share some of the highlights over the last year. Next, please. So as many of you might know, the region that we look at consists of 6 municipalities, and we are receiving interest from people as far away as Midland and Owen Sound in the kind of work that we're doing. So we're a volunteer-driven think and do tank, not-for-profit, and we're focused on 4 main priority areas. We look at business and innovation. We look at the South Georgian Bay Arts Network, which is a new entity that was developed through community conversations that we hosted. We look at social finance and housing and sustainability and the green economy. The interest in community engagement has increased substantially. We now have over 550 newsletter subscribers, and we've had great attendance at our recent events. Next. So the Institute is listening to what community is saying, and we believe that we need to focus on multi-sector partnerships and collaborative leadership to deal with some of the pressing issues that we have in our communities. And so we bring together business, nonprofits, we bring together philanthropists and government representatives and staff. And through this time, we've listened intently to what people have been saying through the pandemic, as well as the 3 UN Habitat and Towns Collingwood World Summits that Collingwood has hosted. And we have played a significant role in attracting local speakers to these international panels on SDG number 11. It has many of the important things that we've been talking about through many of your council meetings, like affordable housing, proactive approaches to climate change. We look at integrated planning, connecting innovation across our towns, and protecting our natural heritage and nurturing our cultural heritage. Next. So the vision is a large one, but it looks at people primarily and harnessing the power of all that talent across this beautiful place that we call Southern Georgian Bay. And we look at a triple bottom line for anything we're involved in. We want to grow social, environmental, and economic prosperity. And the vision is an uber one. It's to be the smartest, greenest, healthiest, and most caring in Ontario. Next, please. As I mentioned earlier, multi-sector partnerships and collective leadership, we believe, is the way that we're going to be able to deal with some of these large issues. Next. If someone asks you, what does the Institute do? We do 3 things. We connect people, we share knowledge, and we nurture collaborative activity. We believe that we need to be doing things we've never done before in this century, and so we need to develop the relationships and trust that will enable us to do these things together, sometimes for the very first time. Next. So some achievements over the last year. As I mentioned earlier, through community conversations during the pandemic, people spoke about the arts and their value, not only to tourists, but for each and every one of us who live in this beautiful place. We were able to hold conversations. There was a group of people who put up their hand to build a regional strategy. A philanthropist stepped forward to fund a new entity called the South Georgian Bay Arts Network. It was launched last fall at the Collingwood Brewery with an amazing show. If you were there, you'd really understand the value of connection and the talent that we have in our communities. We also hosted our first in-person event in a number of years last December, looking at multi-sector partnerships and the role philanthropy could play. In March, many of you attended the very dynamic strategy session that we held at the Marsh Street Centre in Clarksburg. And through that discussion, we have a sketch, which I want to share with you, of what we hope you'll become a lead collaborative partner on. And one of our biggest achievements was the launch of our South Georgian Bay Affordable Housing Toolkit, where we have learned together as a community over 18 months. And the people who are learning in that group became the authors of some very significant pieces that we now share for any community on our toolkit, not the least of which is the what municipalities can do to help progress on the issue of affordable housing. Next, please. So if any of you want to learn more about how did we get here, we've produced an ebook. It's on our About page on our website, and it tells you the story of how when people start to get together and they talk about the issues and they're willing to volunteer, amazing things can happen. So please do take the time at some point to look at that origin story. Next, please. So, the 2023 work plan, inspired by and built upon what our community has been saying through the events that I've mentioned. Last year, we held a series called Local Sustainable Economies. It's been a topic on a lot of our minds, especially through the pandemic, as we experienced and learned all kinds of new things. And we need to look at how do we really build a local sustainable economy for the 21st century. This year's series is called Community Planning, Creating a More Resilient and Sustainable Future, because whatever decisions we're making today are going to be with us for a very long time, and we need to look at community planning in a way that we are all involved. Next, please. So, with your support, we have had 2 virtual events so far focused on unpacking that affordable housing toolkit that I mentioned earlier. And then 35 people put up their hand to learn more about the specifics of social finance and how that can help close the affordability gap on housing. So, we had an extraordinary conversation with the Ottawa Community Land Trust, learning more about land trusts, how they're operating in Ottawa, and how community bonds can help provide some money to make these things happen. This fall, we want to really bring everyone together so that we understand what does it take to build housing, first of all, because a lot of us don't know. But the second part of that is, okay, all of these social finance tools, how do they work? And how would they bring the unit costs down to meet the affordability that we're talking about? So that could happen with your support. We're also looking at a South Georgian Bay social enterprise hub. Social enterprises are a new kind of triple bottom line business that the federal government is investing $750 million in over 10 years to develop more. We think our area could, in fact, be the social enterprise hub for the province. We're also hoping to explore the possibility of having a summit on sustainability and the green economy. When we're looking at economic development, how do we look at it for the 21st century so that we have a matrix of benefits that we can check off that we're interested in achieving through that kind of economic development? And we're wanting to support a regional arts gathering this fall as well. Next, please. So what do we do with the investment? Our goal is to keep all of our programming free and accessible so that all of us can participate. And so what we would do with the investment is support our local economy and to hire local people to help us with communications, with hosting our virtual events and conducting our live events, and ensuring that our website is robust and, again, accessible for everyone. Next, please. We've requested that the town of Collingwood consider becoming a lead partner in this for the municipalities at $10,000. Next, please. So the municipal partner benefits, it's not just for the municipality, of course, it's for all of us. And with your support, we can begin to align the objectives of various municipalities across the region. Some of your earlier discussions were talking about how could we work together regionally. We believe that that's the kind of benefit that we want to nurture more of.
Roz, just to let you know, you have 30 seconds.
Great. Next, please. So we'll hope you join us.
Oh. You timed this out, didn't you?
Yeah. Thank you. So we hope you do consider becoming a lead partner because you're leading the way in a number of areas, and it would be excellent to have Collingwood as one of the lead partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here and making your request. Do any of the committee members have any questions they'd like to ask? Councillor Baines?
Thank you. Roz, can you tell me what is the total amount that you're trying to fundraise? And how many lead partners are you looking for?
We're looking for 6 municipal lead partners, and we're looking for 6 business lead partners. Welcome.
Any other questions for now? Yep. Vice Chair Doherty?
Thank you. This, you may be able to answer this, or I may be able to turn it over to the CAO, but I'm just wondering, what was the level of funding that we provided in 2022?
It was $5,000.
Okay. Thank you. And have you got commitments so far from any of the other municipalities that you're seeking lead?
Yes, we've got a commitment from Meaford. They're coming in at a supporting level.
Okay, very good. And I assume that you'll be taking this show on the road.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
We did a survey at the end of last year, and we asked people about virtual or in-person gatherings. And many, many, many people opted for in-person gatherings, which, as you might know, cost exponentially more.
Yes, great.
Anything else, Skinner?
Thank you through the chair. I was just wondering if there was a particular timing that you were looking for this from council. We do have, of course, the normal budget process, which happens in the fall, and there's decisions late fall for funding in 2024.
Yes, we're looking for it as soon as possible. And we all need to be creative to find the budget lines to make these things happen. We do believe it crosses a lot of department budgetary lines, and also we believe it fills a big gap in that Collingwood is no longer having a summit on affordable housing and climate action.
Okay. Any other questions? No? All right. Thank you very much for being here, and we have your request.
You're very welcome.
Okay, take care. All right, and just before the grain terminals people get set up here, I would also like first to move up. I see our fire chief and our deputy fire chief, and they have an item on here, and I'd like to move them up because I know it's a pretty straightforward item. So with that, I would bring up 5.2. Did you wish to set it up or do a summary, or you were just wanting to view what we... Chief Thurman, you want to come up? And this is...
You don't get to see us very often, so we thought we might as well, especially when
but-
it went out, we were watching from the fire station and thought, we better get down here quick. So, anyway, it was nice to have him with us today.
Thank you.
It's pretty straightforward. We are requesting or hoping to get advance on the new aerial, on an aerial. It's not due till 2025, but because of certain circumstances, one circumstance is delay now. Before COVID, it was 9 to 12 months to get a build on a new pumper or aerial. As of last year, that was 2 years. As of now, it's 3 to 4 years before we can get it in. That's the one issue. The second issue is cost. The cost is going up every quarter. It depends on the dealer, anywhere from 3 to 6% per quarter. So we're kind of in a dilemma here. I know there's some other questions about possible 12-story units in Collingwood. Right now we have the highest at 9. Our aerial at this time is 95 feet. So we can reach that at this time. But if we're going to go to 12 or more, so our intent is hopefully to go to a 125-foot ladder stick. We have different names for it. It changes all the time. So that would give us at least 12, maybe 13 stories, depending on the placement of the truck. So it would definitely help us out at that time. It's pretty straightforward. I would like to answer any questions anybody has.
Okay, and so before we have the committee questions, we're going to go to the public and see if there's anyone who has questions from the public.
Thank you, Chair Jeffrey. We don't have any attendees online, so just who is in our gallery and obviously our remote council representatives.
Okay, and is there anyone in the gallery wishing to speak to this item? Okay, seeing none. Then the motion on the floor is that staff report FS 2023-01, advanced budget approval for the replacement of the aerial apparatus be received, and that council approve the advance purchase order for the replacement of the aerial apparatus to ensure this will meet the capital asset replacement timeline for 2026. Could have a mover and a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Potts and Councillor Ring. Any questions through to the fire chief? Yeah, Councillor Ring.
Thank you very much, Chair Jeffrey. Through you to Chief Thurman. Dan, you mentioned about, and we realize, I thought it was 2 years, but you're up to longer than that now. And I realize the costs are going up. If we order it now, can we guarantee that price, or is it still going to go up regardless of when we order it?
Madam Chair, through you, it would be guaranteed. There's payment options too. You could also pay 0% time of purchase, or we could pay up to 3/4. It's whatever our Chair Quinlan or Treasurer Quinlan, sorry, decides on what would be the best way to go forward with that. Yeah, so it would be whatever the price was that they would stick with it, honor it.
And I realize that the equipment we have is all estimated on replacement times, and we'll be within or well over maybe the replacement of the aerial by the time we can actually get it, won't we?
Yeah, through you, Chair. It will be, looking at it now, we're supposed to replace it in 2025, but we're looking at probably second quarter of 2026, probably at the earliest.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Doherty.
Thank you, Chair. I had previously sent forward a question regarding whether you had been considering a higher or more extendable ladder because we were contemplating buildings that could be as high as 12 stories, but you've already answered that question for me, so thank you. The second question in the report, you mentioned that the fire DC reserve is sitting at 323,000, which is less than what it should be. So I just wanted to ask through you to the treasurer, perhaps, what is the target balance for the fire DC fund, and what is the reason why there's a deficit in that account right now?
Okay, is Treasurer Quinlan available to us? Oh, sorry, CO Skinner. Yep.
I know that Treasurer Quinlan was in transit and was going to log back in a few moments, so she will be back during this meeting if she's not available right now.
Is that an answer you need to be able to vote on this evening, or something she
No,
can follow up with?
it is what it is, right? So yeah, we can perhaps have her answer that question later.
Through you, Madam Chair,
Yep,
she
thank
did
you.
send an email out earlier. If you,
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, and I'm similar. I had some interest in the information in the report about the requirement. It suggested that you needed about 650 in the reserve for the fire portion of what's coming out of the DC fund, and it suggested that it'd be about 460K at the end of this year, and then suggested that there'd be the shortfall. But I was thinking to myself, well, if this isn't going to be delivered until 2026, and it looks like payment doesn't have to happen until 2026, it seemed to me like we were going to be close to having that 650,000 if it accumulated the same way. So my question was, is there something else that might, maybe there's another item that you're purchasing that requires DC funds to be allocated to it. So again, that's something the treasurer can answer in the course of communicating back about things to Councillor Doherty. So because it's not going to, I support the report as is, and the only other question I had was, in your estimation, then the 2.25 million is what you would anticipate the price to be when you get out there and you procure and go through the procurement process?
That's correct. We're kind of predicting I'm hoping to get it very quickly, probably have it complete within the next month and a half. And at that timeline, from what we've talked to vendors, we're right in there. Yeah.
And that's great. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
I do have one other thing that it's, we do have the area that we have now. My intent is I would like to keep it. We wouldn't get enough for it to really make it worthwhile. From speaking to the buyers out there, you're looking at about $200,000. The truck is in excellent condition, but it's almost at the point of being a second run truck. And when we do need the aerial, we need two. If you ever look at our big fires, it's always two. You need to surround and drown and rescue. So I would like to keep that. It is an option if we have to go out and sell it, but I would really like to keep it. It also would be a good second run truck if we do build the second station.
Thank you for adding that. That's great. All right. So I'm not seeing any further questions. So with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. We can now see you, Mayor Hamlin. No hiding. Anyway, thank you very much, gentlemen, and have a great evening. So that will take us to 5.4. Is regarding the Memorandum of Understanding, the Grain Terminals Revitalization Project. And we're going to ask Executive Director Amanda Pegg to take us through the information, please.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for moving the item up. I'm sure our community members appreciate it. So today I'm pleased to present to the committee a much anticipated update on the Grain Terminals Revitalization Project. With us today, we have Manager McNulty, who spearheads our fleet and facilities team. KPMG, our project advisor, Sean Oakley's on the line, and Ron Glenn, our principal planner from Big P Planning, sends his regrets. Unfortunately, he can't make the meeting. But I did want to let the committee know that those folks are available in the event there's any questions following the presentation. I also wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the artwork on this slide. So Claire Rays, who's a former Town of Collingwood employee and a local artist, did create this bespoke image of the terminals. And we've been using it quite a bit lately. And I thought I better make reference that she's very talented and did that work. So I thought I would call that out as well. And I'd also like to take a moment just to acknowledge our partner, Streetcar and Dream, Les Mallon's president of Streetcar, and Hua, who's the development manager, have been great to work with. And we certainly wouldn't be where we are today without their collaborative approach. So I did want to take a moment to say that as well. So the Collingwood grain terminals have a long history in Collingwood, and our community has been wondering for quite some time what the future holds for this iconic structure. We've heard through our community-based strategic plan, our waterfront master plan, most recently through our built heritage assessment, that our community wants a year-round signature destination, and they want a lively waterfront that is available to residents and visitors alike, and an opportunity to revitalize the waterfront. And again, we've heard that through many studies that we've done today, or master plans. The white paper was presented to council in 2019, and the outcome was council direction to seek a potential private sector partner to work with the town to revitalize the grain terminals. And in 2021, the town went to tender for this partner. And those proposals were evaluated based on development principles. Next slide, please. And I will thank the committee for giving me a moment just to go through some of this history, because I do think it is really important and it lays the foundation for where we are today. So thank you, Chair. So in terms of the development principles, I will continue to reference these at every presentation because they really have become part of this project's fabric. Streetcar and Dreams concept outlined a clear commitment to developing their vision within these principles, and the development principles were created by the town and approved by our previous council. The principles are drawn from community-based strategic plan, our waterfront master plan, and again, most recently, our built heritage assessment. And these were key documents that were created through extensive public consultation and input. There are a number of development principles, but I've starred two to speak to. So structural preservation. So when we went out looking for a development partner, we indicated it was imperative that the revitalization preserve the terminals in some form and public access. So optimizing public access to the waterfront and open spaces. These aren't weighted or listed in any particular order, but I felt for the purposes of today's presentation that those were really important to flag. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, council directed staff based on the white paper that was presented in 2019 to proceed with seeking a partner. So we went through a selection process, which was a two-stage procurement, which was led by Director Almas and her team. There was a call to interested parties for the Collingwood Grain Terminal's revitalization opportunity that closed on April 6th. And there was a request for proposals that closed on July 25th. Our independent fairness monitor oversaw this entire process and provided a positive report to council at the conclusion. Seeking a partner has really opened the door for us to do more for our community, and we feel that it achieves three critical goals. One, it ensures that the town maintains ownership of the majority of the lands, and in doing so, maintains public access to those lands. Gives the town authority to set our expectations, and that's demonstrated through the development principles. Brings greater value for taxpayers or Collingwood residents, and it leverages private investment to upgrade and enhance our public spaces and meet our community needs. Next slide, please. So through that procurement process, and as we all are well aware now, Streetcar and Dream was a successful proponent. Again, they had the closest alignment to the development principles that were or have formed really the fabric of this project. They did publicly present their proposed vision on March 27th, and town staff and council have continued to show their support for this partnership. To enable us to reimagine and revitalize the grain terminals and surrounding lands. I opted to include this slide, and I'll give credit to Les and his team for the layout of the images and all the logos. But really, this shows the caliber of the folks that they're bringing to the table. So this partnership is with Streetcar and Dream, but they have retained architect, landscape architect, planner, Indigenous consultants, structural engineers, heritage architects. So it's quite a robust team that is standing behind and beside them as we move forward in this project. Next slide, please. This slide here, I know it's a bit hard to see, but it is available on Engage Collingwood. So I encourage anyone that wants to look at it in detail to visit that site. I just wanted to take a moment to highlight their master plan. So the development proposal includes redeveloping Heritage Drive into 4 distinct areas that link together, preserving and revitalizing the terminals into a full-service hotel with restaurant and event spaces, adding a residential condominium to the east of the terminals, creating public access to the top bin floor for views of Georgian Bay and downtown historic Collingwood, enhancing the community's access to the shoreline and water, creating new trails and walkways, lookouts, and boardwalks, creating space for shops and opportunities to showcase local art and culture, and transforming the Collingwood Harbour Marine area. The final decision for the design of the public areas we anticipate will be highly informed through community input, and we'll talk more about public engagement in a moment. Next slide, please. So why are we here today? So the report mentioned the Memorandum of Understanding. So since September of 2022, the town's project team has been actively negotiating with Streetcar and Dream to establish a Memorandum of Understanding, or an MOU. The town has used third-party advisor, KPMG, to support this project. And we've also been consulting with the legal team at every step to make sure that we are diligent. And council has also been incredibly diligent in asking for an additional information to ensure comfort with moving forward. On May 8th, council directed staff to proceed to public session with a bylaw. And at this time, staff are recommending that the MOU or the bylaw for the MOU be approved so we can proceed with execution of the MOU. Given the significance and importance of this project, we have taken every step to protect the community's interests. We continue to be aligned with the development principles and are working and have established a positive working relationship with Streetcar and Dream. The MOU is not legally binding, but it is important to note that it will form the foundation for future binding agreements. So that will include the development agreement, any purchase or sale agreement, and any lease agreement. So certainly we hope that the MOU will help streamline the drafting of those agreements, and is why we were so diligent in taking our time to make sure we got this right. Next slide, please. So we've certainly heard a lot of input and questions from the community around the MOU. What does it contain? So I thought it was important to speak to the MOU as a public document. So it is normal and it is important that the MOU remain confidential. It does form part of active negotiations, and it helps ensure that the town gets the best value for our residents. However, we do recognize that this is a high profile and important project to this community, and Streetcar and Dream recognizes that as well. So under mutual agreement, we have decided to release certain elements of the Memorandum of Understanding. Certainly not required, and we did have a legal opinion and a fairness monitor comment on that to make sure we were fully transparent should a full release of the MOU be required. But their advice to council and staff is that it remain confidential and only certain elements under mutual agreement be disclosed. And we'll get into those elements now. So next slide, please. So the purchase and sale agreement. So the town will retain ownership of most of the lands. So only the space for the residential condominium would be sold to Streetcar and Dream, and potentially lands to accommodate parking for the condominium. And that accounts for an approximate 0.2 acres of the full 20 acres of the spit lands. Next slide, please. So this image highlights the side-by-side of the current structure and the proposed development. I have added a orange highlight on the image for you. That is a total approximation, but just to try to draw your eye to the area that would be sold. So in essence, the lands proposed to be sold include the footprint of the rail shed or the maintenance shop, or what the community often references as the red brick building. And land to accommodate parking would also be considered in the sale. And then, of course, all land amounts would need to be confirmed in the development agreement. I also thought I would highlight here that the red brick building materials, so the brick itself, Streetcar and Dream does envision repurposing that material on the spit, whether that's in walkways or memorials of some form. So they do see an opportunity to reuse that material from a heritage element, but also for sustainability purposes. And more details on that's available in their presentation, which is linked on Engage Collingwood. Next slide, please. So the lease agreement. So the town will is proposing that we enter a long-term lease with Streetcar and Dream for the approximate 0.8 acres. This would accommodate the conversion of the silos into a hotel and, of course, other public amenities. And again, any land amounts would need to be confirmed in the development agreement. Next slide, please. So the proposal of the lease is to enable the adaptive reuse of the silos into the hotel. So this image or this rendering is one of Streetcar and Dreams. And I can appreciate again that it's a little bit hard to see the top images. But the adaptive reuse of the silos would preserve the iconic facade of the terminals. So their intention is to keep Collingwood Terminals Limited. That was something that came through the built heritage assessment as something that was really important to the community. They're also looking at adding windows to the terminals, but doing that in the least invasive way possible. So where the silos kiss, is where the cutouts would be added to allow natural light into the hotel, but still, again, making every effort to preserve the external facade of the silos. And then the second image there is showing public realm enhancement. So the main floor of the silos, in that adaptive reuse, their proposal includes things like shops, maybe rentals for kayaks or different water activities, and much more. So that would be how they would envision the adaptive reuse of those silos. Next slide, please. This slide here is, again, looking at how a land lease would help facilitate the adaptive reuse. So Streetcar and Dream is looking at turning the bin floor into a public access area, which would provide unprecedented views of Georgian Bay, and again, downtown Collingwood. They envision this space having a restaurant, event space, lookouts, and more. And again, their proposal on Engage Collingwood, the March 27th presentation, has more details. And again, the long-term lease would support this taking place. Next slide, please. So the town's financial commitment. So a mandatory requirement of our partnership with Streetcar and Dream was that the town contribute in a manner relative to our 10-year capital plan. And this is towards public amenities, or what we're referencing public realm enhancements, that would be developed along the spit. Treasurer Quinlan's done a great job working through development charge eligibility, and it's really been a great support for this project. So certainly the just shy of $16 million, we'd be looking for development credit eligibility as appropriate. And as the final design develops through community consultation process, the total budget impact may be subject to change. So this is what we're anticipating at this time, but we recognize that the community consultation process needs to take place, and there may be either additions or changes to the project. And also we recognize the realities of the cost of construction today may have some impact, but certainly if there was any impact, we'd be reporting back to council for further direction. Next slide, please. So the 10-year capital plan, as I mentioned, is what was used to derive the just shy of $16 million. The plan, or the excerpt from the plan, is available as Appendix B to the staff report. I opted not to include it on the slide because it was incredibly difficult to see, but I encourage individuals that want to see that level of detail to take a look at Appendix B of the report. So the costs were derived again from the waterfront master plan and were escalated by 40% to become part of the development charge study in 2019. And then subsequently, the amounts were included in the 10-year capital plan as forecasted public realm enhancements. So the 10-year capital plan isn't funded, but it is something that we have on our radar as we're looking at preparing budgets for council consideration. And then the present value of those costs were discounted at 5% to $22, and that was at the time of the proposal submission. I also wanted to note that the alternative to proceeding with the proposed project is status quo, and that was outlined in the white paper which CAO Skinner and Director Collver had presented to council. The town would then need to consider funding the cost of abatement and preservation of the terminals or demolition. These costs were estimated at that time between $8 and $12 million. And that work would not be eligible for development charge credits. Worth noting, though, is that the $8 to $12 million was an estimate in 2019. That is not at current dollars or current construction realities. Next slide, please. We've also received questions from the community around access during construction. So we thought this was an important element to highlight. So key stakeholder groups in the public, it is our intention to enable access to the spit as much as possible while realizing the realities of construction and making sure that health and safety of the community remains top of mind and at the forefront. So there will be times when access will be limited or restricted, but we are committed to ensuring that public notice is provided as far in advance as possible, and certainly consultation with key stakeholders like the Collingwood Yacht Club would take place, and alternatives would, we'd seek to find alternatives to try and accommodate access whenever possible. And then the access program will be refined as we move to next phases of the project, and certainly well before we start looking at construction. Next slide, please. So public engagement. So the town's financial commitment would support the public realm portion of the development. So the public realm will have its own distinct public engagement process, separate and apart from the hotel and condo development. Now, the hotel and condo development will have a public engagement process, but there will be two processes happening in tandem, and we'll make sure that the communication around that is really clear. But I just wanted to really put a fine point that this is our opportunity through that engagement, or the community's opportunity, to really shape what's built on the spit, and that the 10-year capital budget forecast, or the monies that are derived from that, are intended to fund these enhancements. So our goal continues to be creating a high-quality destination that preserves the terminals in some form, ensures public access to all open spaces, and revitalizes the waterfront. And we certainly recognize that different people may want different things. So as we move forward to determine the plans for the public lands, we'll ensure that the consultation plan creates opportunities to hear from all and balance all perspectives. So not everybody's going to want a skating rink, for example. Not everybody's going to want an amphitheater. But the opportunity to hear from everyone will be really, really important to finalize what is built on those public lands. And the Town Engaged Collingwood website will continue to be the central hub for all information, updates, and next steps related to this project. And I certainly encourage anyone that's interested to subscribe. So now if there is any update and you subscribe to that page, you'll get notification when an update's made. So you don't have to worry about checking it every night before bed. You'll get a notification. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there will be two public engagement processes taking place. So one on the hotel and condominium development, and one on the public spaces. So this image there, and again, it might be a bit tough to see, but it is available on Engage Collingwood. So I encourage folks to take a look there to see what the key milestones are. And this image also highlights where we are today. So we're right at the beginning of the consultation process, and it also highlights key council decision points. So we will be seeking council input and thus input from the community at a number of points throughout this project. And there'll also be key decision points of council as we move forward as well. And those are highlighted. So next step, so pending council approval to proceed with the execution of the MOU, town staff will proceed with the next phases of this project. And that would include planning for the initial community engagement and consultation, with the intention of beginning really active engagement this year. We had hoped to kick that off as early as July, but just based on timelines, we're not sure that summer will continue to be feasible. But we are hoping to get started as soon as possible, as is Streetcar and Dream. In addition, Streetcar and Dream and the town will begin to negotiate the required binding agreements, so the development agreement and other associated agreements. And additional investigative work on the terminals and surrounding lands will also commence. And public input in the findings from that investigation work will be critical in informing the final design and concepts for the lands, which of course will be subject to council decisions under the Planning Act. And I believe that was my last slide. So next slide, please. Wonderful. So thank you so much for hearing my presentation. And it's a beautiful image, and I'll give photo credit to Doug Burlock Photography, also a very talented individual.
Well, thank you very much for a very concise and thorough update for us. So we'll start to see if there is anyone online publicly. No? All right. So we'll go right to the gallery. Is there anyone wishing to speak to this? Margaret Moy, come on forward.
Thank you, Mayor Jeffries. Not Mayor. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm going to check my paycheck. I'll refer staff to you.
Mayor Jeffries, I'm
Thank you.
sorry. Council and staff. I'm Margaret Moy, for those who don't know me. I'm here to represent the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, the Collingwood branch. I also am representing and sitting on the board for Collingwood Terminals and Harbour Action Group. And I'm also a non-voting member of the Heritage Committee for the town. And each of these groups is a stakeholder in this project and will be submitting their own comments on their, approval, disapproval, what they like, what they don't like at a later date during public engagement. As far as ACO, the terminals are on the provincial endangered property list. So we're just watching to see what happens. It's a good project to use adaptive reuse in the efforts to save it. And that being said, the Collingwood Terminals and Harbour Action Group did collect almost 9,000 signatures to save, preserve, and protect the terminals. The Heritage Committee recognizes, of course, that the terminals are in Collingwood's Conservation District. And I'm going to address more the maintenance tonight in preserving the terminals. And hopefully that could be fit into the MOU. Town expects designated property owners to maintain their properties, and they offer incentives to do so. And I have great concerns that the town is not maintaining its own heritage property of the terminals. And I'm hoping in the MOU, and maybe with the proponents and the town as partners, they look after some of the pressing needs. It's well known that the roof has needed replacement for many, many, many years. There have been 2 quotes received to replace that roof, but nothing has been done. The building has needed repainting for many, many years, and there have been 2 different offers of donations for the paint. And I understand the first one was because of environmental issues and the spraying and everything, but there has been another offer since then. The town has not taken that up. The Marine Tower has several broken windows, so no wonder the birds are getting in there and causing destruction in that area. So that area needs to be repaired. And also the exterior lighting. Not all the lights work, and it would have been nice to, retain that. I know the town has a cost of preserving the elevator and staff that can go up to address the communication towers that are up there. But the last statement that I got, the town pays out far more in these maintenance costs than they receive from the communication companies that use the towers up there. So maybe there's a way the communication companies could help with the cost of replacing the roof. I don't know, be inventive a little bit about it. So I do have some of those concerns because what I've heard from Amanda, that it's going to be at least 5 years for completion. So if you just leave the building sitting there and continue to do no maintenance, number one, it's not a good example from the rest of the heritage property owners. And also, it's not going to preserve the building. I think lastly, I'd like to address, I'm hoping that a heritage impact assessment would be done before demolition occurs to the shipping tower and the rail shed and the brick building. There is some significance of the rail and the trains coming out to those terminals, so there may be a way to incorporate it in the design. But also, if it's at all possible to preserve the red brick building and move it somewhere else, the town knows that buildings can be moved. The Watts boathouse was moved to where it is now. Also, Cullum House, a much bigger brick house on here, Ontario, was moved and out of our district, unfortunately, but it was moved. So I'd like sort of to look at those things and look outside the box and see if there's enough cultural significance to preserve those two areas. So tonight my talk was more about maintenance. We'll talk about design and everything at another time. So thank you.
Good timing.
Thank you for
Right on your
listening.
5 minutes. Thank you for your input, for sure. All right. Someone else from the gallery who would like to come up? Mr. Jowett, come on up.
Mr. Chairman, Council, and Mayor, if you can see me. I just, I don't want to sound negative, but I really feel strongly that this council can take a hold of a lot of things that were neglected with previous councils, right from 1986. This terminal's iconic building, our harbor, are unique in Canada, unique in Georgian Bay. My wife and I have boated right down the Mississippi to Florida and over to Mackinac, every island. What I'm saying there, we've compared what we've got in this town, in this this spit of land, we call it. I think that the program that Streetcar and Dream it's fantastic. I probably won't live long enough to see it. But what I'm driving at, in the next 5 years, the town has got to show them that we respect this, and we haven't respected it. Just like Margaret says, we got 12 tenants on the roof, and they don't pay enough to look after the maintenance. We got an agreement with the yacht club for a few more years at $15,000 a year, and they're taking in $150,000. I mean, these are things that are just ridiculous. And again, I'm sounding negative, but it's the truth. And I think this council has got to get a hold of all these things and show them Dream and Streetcar that we appreciate this business of looking after it properly. The big thing that I see, that's, and I'm agreeing with the whole program, except we got a problem here, and we always have it in this town, with parking. They can put $200 million into this project, but where's everybody going to park? So I think we got to take a long look at maybe Larry Dunn's property. And I don't know if you know it or not. We have a piece of property which is unique in the waterway, right off of Minnesota Street. We have a piece of property underwater, of approximately 2 football fields. The piers are still there from the original docks that were there. That is another good spot that could be made for parking. So my contention here is, no matter what Dream does, we got to look after parking, and we have to show them the principle of what we will look after this building and everything until they take over, which is approximately 5 years. I think that this council is appropriately set up to look after everything, and I really appreciate all of you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you Bing, for being here.
Any questions?
I'm not seeing any.
Pardon?
I'm not seeing any questions.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Yep, no problem. And from the gallery? Yes, sir. Come on up. Welcome, Mr. McGarry.
Thank you. My name is John McGarry. I reside at 15 Sunset. Very excited on this project. It's just really a fabulous looking project to take, a long derelict industrial facility and turn it into something with some utility and usefulness and preserving the emotional impact of people that really, see this as a visible icon of the town. But in reading through the MOU, and if I understand correctly, we are not going to sell the property that the terminal sits on. We're going to lease that to Streetcar, and I haven't seen anywhere yet, and I suppose we will eventually see what kind of revenue the town will take from that. But I'd always thought that one of the objectives in this thing was to offload the potential future liability of that structure and, the piers that support it underneath. And I wondered how along the line we, got away from the idea of selling the entire terminal's property and maintaining the lease. So, was that ever in negotiation? I'd like to, at some point, hear from town officials about what happened there, because that was a big surprise and a significant disappointment to me. And if it is going to be leased, what is the plan for protecting the town residents from any future liability and costs that might be incurred down the road if there is, for example, deterioration of the underpinnings in that structure? So, further, as a lay person, the project looks to require some very difficult and very expensive engineering and construction. It looks like a very, very difficult thing to achieve, and I would guess costing several times what a new build would be for a hotel and condominium project. So I'm wondering, and so it's risky. And I'm wondering what measures we are taking to protect against any possible financial collapse of the proponent, either during the construction phase or in post-construction in the operational life of the facility. So are we well protected? As well, there have been occasions in the past in Collingwood where we've been very lax in requiring and enforcing performance bonds on projects. And I want to be assured that there would be an adequate bond posted to cover any shortcomings or problems that might occur during the construction period. Next, during construction and later during the operational phase of the hotel and condos, that'll generate pretty heavy vehicle traffic on Heritage Way. So I wonder if there has been or will there be any traffic study to look at, is Heritage Way capable of taking the additional traffic? Someone, I think, mentioned parking already. Kind of a nightmare in that whole vicinity, in behind the Rexall building. We've got another new condo under construction. We've got one coming, and we got the Perfect World Hotel. And on top of that, this is going to be a very, very concentrated area, generating a lot of parking and a lot of traffic. And I really wonder, are we doing adequate studies to project what's coming and to prevent even further parking problems in that area? The MOU talks about additional investigation work, and I wonder if we might know what that might entail, and is there any possibility that this investigation work could, lead to cancellation of the project? So when they say investigation work, what is that really? What are they investigating? And
Okay.
Page 9, as executive director pointed out, there was an old estimate of between $8 and $12 million for demolition. If along the way there is demolition required, it'll obviously be much, much higher cost than the 8 to 12 million. So is there some provision made for possible demolition should the developer abandon the project, say in an unfinished state? What happens, and is the town adequately protected there? So those are some of the questions I have, and I hope that those will be drawn out in time, or if you'd like these addressed to council, in writing and looking, I'd be glad to do that and hope for some more detailed answers.
Excellent. Okay. So you're bringing some good questions. And what I'm going to just, before we go any further, if there's others wishing to speak, Executive Director Peg, did you wish to make any comments on the 3 presentations so far, just as to next steps when that information might be available to them? And I'm sure we would welcome their written submissions in any event.
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely. I'll make a couple high-level comments. First of all, I've been taking notes at all of the comments and information that's been shared thus far. Definitely some really great questions and things for us to consider, some of which are well on the top of our priority list already, but it's nice to hear that community members have the same thoughts. In terms of minimum maintenance or maintenance of the terminals, if the committee does want to hear more information, Manager McNulty is here who can speak to our current practices. So, Chair, I'll leave that to you if that's something you'd like comment on. In terms of next steps, so all of the stakeholders, including the public at large, will have the opportunity to provide statements around the vision. Including how, thoughts on parking, on impacts to other areas, et cetera, that will be considered by Streetcar and Dream and the town through our engagement process. And then in terms of investigative work, those fine-tuned details will come out in the development agreement, including contingencies. So what happens if X? So for example, one of the things that that I know the community is well aware of, as is council and staff, is that there's a confined disposal of contaminants on the spit. So one, for example, investigative work would be to look into the current state of that disposal unit. We're also anticipating a parking study and whatnot on the spit as well, which has been identified. So I don't know if there's anything else you were hoping I would comment on, and certainly Manager McNulty could provide more information if the chair and committee would like.
Okay,
Thank you.
That's great. So just before I ask Mr. McNulty to respond to some of the maintenance, is there anyone else in the gallery wishing to speak to the committee? If not, then I'll ask Manager McNulty, am I getting that title right? Manager McNulty, to maybe give us a bit of an update or information on the ongoing maintenance as we're going through the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, we are operating currently in a status quo point, I guess, where we have not budgeted for any of the major repairs that would need to be done that would include abatement of the bird leftovers or asbestos, nor have we budgeted at this point for replacement of the roof. What we are doing is maintaining safe access for staff and contractors. The passenger elevator is critical in order to be able to get people up to the upper levels, to be able to carry on the maintenance activities. 95% of the terminals is normally free of birds. We do get the odd broken window pane, some get in. And so one of our primary activities is to replace the window panes as they get broken. Um, we have and have had for some time an intrusion alarm in the terminals to keep unwanted people out. And we've recently installed security cameras around the perimeter. In terms of trying to keep the appearance upgraded, we have just this spring replaced the plywood coverings over the basement windows on the north side facing Millennium Park. And again, one of our primary focuses is to keep the place secure, keep the birds out of where we don't want them to be, or where we can keep them out, and other wildlife as well. From time to time, we've had a family of raccoons there that we've had to deal with. I think that's what I can offer right now.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Manager McNulty. All right, so there's no other public portions. So what I'm going to do is read the motion, and then we'll have the committee participation. So that staff report CCS 2023-3 grain terminals revitalization update be received, and that council directs staff to execute the memorandum of understanding MOU with Streetcar and Dream Grain Terminals Revitalization Inc. Have a mover and a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Houston, and then those wishing to speak. So Deputy Mayor.
I'll go first. I'm sure everybody wants to share some. I was going to say that it's understandable we're hearing the same types of questions that the council's brought forward through the process. A difficulty we have is that some of the specific detail that we've been able to hear in camera can't be shared for a collection of reasons, and we leave that to staff and Streetcar and Dream to decide what elements can be shared. But it makes it difficult because some of those specifics can't be shared, and I think again that's understandable for everybody. But I had some comments that I'd put together, and I was going to say that maybe talk first about the idea of offloading the risk of the current structure. And I'm satisfied that we're working towards that and doing that as best we can with the MOUs going through. The other thing is that in my opinion, it's understandable that the MOU at this stage has to be non-binding. Our understanding is that the proponent does need to look at this in more detail and touch on just what Mr. McGarry brought up, some further extensive study to determine the ability to do some of the concept that's being put forward. But that work has to be done in order to get those answers, and the developer needs to be able to do that, and they need to have a base understanding of that MOU to give them a bit of a solid foot underneath, because that clear understanding of will help with their own partner. And this is another thing that we've talked about within the whole time we've been discussing it, is we recognize that this has to be a successful enterprise, or there is the risk of the need for contingencies and the need to say, like, if this fails, what happens, and that type of thing. So we've tried to study, without going into detail, the success of the project from our point of view, in the idea of it being sustainable, and so we're, again, some of that study that's been done can't be shared at this point in time. But we do intend on bringing that forward. And I think the last thing is I'm very supportive of what Ms. Mui presented, because I do believe there's that heritage, that reuse aspect of things that are in play here, and I've said before that I definitely support the previous council's goal of putting this out to RFP, of asking anybody who's putting a request for or a proposal forward that the structure be maintained. I looked to Mr. Reddick's comments from the first meeting, which was, it's better than what I thought it would look like. And so I'm at that stage still right now, and I'm supportive of the MOU moving forward. So thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Could I just have a show of hands of everyone who wishes to speak to this item? Okay. All right. So Mayor Hamlin, we'll go to you because you're virtual up there. So go ahead.
Sorry, finding the mute button is always a challenge for me. I just wanted to say firstly, thank you to our senior staff who have been shepherding this project through to date, in particular our Executive Director, Peg, who make the presentation tonight. I know on council, we're also appreciative of the hard work that has brought this project to the point tonight where we have a memorandum of understanding before us. I'm, of course, in favor of this recommendation. I have been on council now 5 years and saw the beginning of this discussion 5 years ago. And I really feel at this time we've got this opportunity in the history of our community to move forward and make a difference on the waterfront. For those who know your history of the waterfront, there were 2 wooden grain terminals built in the 1880s, which through fire or otherwise were demolished. And it's only because this one built in 2019 was built with concrete that it's still there today. As we all know, the terminals closed for business in 86, and the town took ownership in 97. And luckily our staff and previous councils have put some park in there and we've been able to use it. But really this property has been sitting here waiting for the next phase for many decades now. So I believe that we're very fortunate in the development team that's come forward. They're very professional. I can assure Mr. McGarry that his concerns about risk and liability are at top of mind for our staff and our council. For sure, as a community entering into a very significant public-private partnership of this magnitude, for us, other than how wonderful we're all hoping this would be, we have to very much manage what kind of risk we might be getting our municipality into, and making sure as much as possible that there will be none. So all to say, I'm very much in favor of this preliminary. It's still very much a preliminary point that we're at. And I think Mr. McGarry pointed out this project could still be canceled. Absolutely. The MOU is not a binding agreement, as Executive Director Peg pointed out, but it does set a substantial base document for the legal agreements that will now start to be negotiated. I think it's fair to say that both sides have a really good understanding of the deal they want, and that's possible to be achieved. And now we can get into the details of the development agreement, the long-term lease, and the sale of the 0.2 acres. And of course, all the public meetings that will begin as soon as is able. So I'll just finish by saying again, thank you to everyone for all the hard work, and I look forward to moving forward on this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else with any questions or comments? Okay, excellent. All right, so I too would extend my appreciation to staff. I remember the white paper we received at the Legion and was under our former executive director, who is now our CAO, Skinner. And also, I think the previous council, who I think this agenda item had gone through so many councils and not been dealt with and just kind of got turned over to the next council. And I think the previous council who finally said this decision as to next steps will be made before the end of our term. And it took a great effort by staff to ensure that that did happen. So we do appreciate that. Okay, so with that, with no other comments, then I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you. Enjoy your evening.
I
All right, so now we will go back up to the top of our staff reports to 5.1, which is with respect to our annual lobbyist registry report. And I understand that we have Manager Truman, who is going to give us a brief report. Manager Truman?
Thank you very much, Chair. There's just a brief slide presentation coming up. We can start on page 2. Sorry, is this any clearer? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair Jeffries. Yeah, so I'm here to deliver the 2022 annual lobbyist registry report. And so just to start off, I thought it would be helpful to get into a couple helpful definitions. So what is lobbying? Lobby or lobbying means any communication with a public office holder by an individual who is paid or who represents a business or financial interest with the goal of trying to influence any legislative action, including development, introduction, passage, defeat, amendment, or repeal of a bylaw, motion, resolution, or the outcome of a decision on any matter before council, a committee of council, or a staff member acting under delegated authority. And then who can be lobbied? So this is the definition of a public office holder, which means A, a member of council, B, an officer or employee of the town in a management position or with the decision-making powers, or who have direct contact with council committee or local board. C, a member of a local board or committee established by council. D, employees who work on municipal elections in a supervisory role. E, an accountability officer, including but not limited to the integrity commissioner, the lobbyist registrar, an ombudsman, or a closed meeting investigator. Or F, individuals providing professional services to the town during the course of providing such services. Next slide, please. We have 3 different types of lobbyists that we define in our bylaw. So we have a consultant lobbyist, which is an individual who lobbies for payment on behalf of a client. An in-house lobbyist, an individual who is an employee, partner, or sole proprietor, and who lobbies on behalf of their own employer, business, or other entity. And a voluntary unpaid lobbyist, which is an individual who lobbies without payment on behalf of an individual, business, or any other for-profit entity for the benefit of the interest of the individual's businesses or for-profit entity. So this is, next slide, please. So this is the third full year, 2022 was the third full year of the lobbyist registry program being in effect. So I've provided just some kind of comparable stats year after year. So in 2022, we recorded 49 lobbying acts. And there's just a simple breakdown in terms of who was lobbied. So 62% of all lobbying activity involved a member of council, whereas 38 involved a member of town staff. The number of individual lobbyists was 40 for this past year. And the reason why that's different than the number above is because a certain individual can be registered for several different lobbying actions, which happened in 2022. And then we also break down by lobbyist type. So we saw in-house lobbyists was 33, 12 consultant lobbyists, and 4 voluntary unpaid lobbyists. Next slide, please. And this is just the subject matter that of lobbying actions. So planning and development was the most popular item that saw lobbying action. And then also the town's information and technology, our IT department, and then parks, recreation, arts, and culture. Those were the top 3. And then you can see everything as it lays out throughout the list. And then on to the next slide, please. And then just final considerations, the Lobbyist Registry program has been a great success story for the town. At the time of the implementation, Collingwood was the smallest municipality in Ontario to have created such a program. This success has led Collingwood to set the stage for small municipalities to enact a lobbyist registry system. And we have now helped other municipalities to create their own programs by sharing our experiences. The town representatives have continued to communicate that transparent, publicly registered, and appropriate lobbying is a normal municipal process, and that those lobbying can advocate for positive changes in our community. And that's the last slide. Next slide is just for questions.
Please, Councillor Baines and Councillor Ring. Any questions? Yes, Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a problem with the report. I'm certainly supportive of receiving it. The numbers that Manager Truman showed us got me a little intrigued because there was a significant drop in 2022, and it has been explained that it could have to do with the fact that it was a lame duck period in election. But I took a look at 2023, and again, the numbers kind of intrigued me because as it stands in my count, we've got 18 to date, and that's about just over 5 months. And 13 of those are to staff. So the ratio of that 60, kind of 2/3, 1/3, which was council and staff, has now flipped over, and it's 72% staff. So when I see numbers like that move around, I always wonder why. And so, as I said, I was just looking at that and thinking, I was thinking about the fact that I do believe there's training planned for council in regards to the lobbyist registry, and that is going to happen shortly. So I don't think I was going to ask for numbers, the ratios on 2020 and 2021, but I don't think I need to see that. I think if we go through the training process, we'll see if that changes some of the numbers in its own meaning. That suggests to me that as council, we've got to remember there's that requirement that we need to talk to individuals who are talking to us, that they need to be putting their names down on the registry. And I'm not saying that's not happening. I'm just saying when I see numbers flip-flopping like that, I always wonder about it.
My one question too is, once a lobbyist is registered and they're speaking to us about the same file, they're not required to register again, I don't think, with the new council. CEO, do you want me to have Manager Truman? Yeah, Manager Truman, I guess my question is, once they're registered, that would maybe account for the fact that they didn't have to register again if it's on the same file, right? Or no?
Thank you, Chair. You're partially correct. They should be registering again in every year. So registered action in 2022, if it's the same group speaking about the same file with the same individuals, they should still register again for 2023. That's how we've managed it so far.
Councillor Potts.
Thanks, Chair Jeffrey. Just to Manager Truman, just a clarification. So if we have an individual reach out to us for to speak and we refer them through the process, at what point do we wait till they're actually listed, or when, like, how do we know when it's good to kind of engage and not engage?
Manager Truman?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Councillor Potts. Traditionally, I send out a confirmation email to the potential lobbyist to say they've been added to the registry. That's traditionally how it works. I'm the one who manages the inbox and all the different kind of coming and going of it. I can also follow up with individuals who are listed as potentially being lobbied. We do prefer that you do ask them to register before any lobbying action. But we also do understand sometimes conversations can evolve. Maybe you don't think it's going to start as a discussion around something that could be considered lobbying, and then maybe it starts to sound like that. And that's where we ask that within 10 days of the act of lobbying that they also submit. So there is a little bit of a time period that they can submit within.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And sorry, Councillor Baines, you must have yours well developed now because I missed you twice. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair, but I think the questioning by Deputy Mayor Fryer answered most of them, and I would assume that the training will for us as councillors as well. I would just comment that since there's such a short time period since this program has been set up, that there's no pattern of requests to councillors or council. And I would assume after 4 years or so, some sort of pattern might develop, i.e., with the new young, well, not necessarily young, the new councillors, it might take a while for lobbyists to find us and to ply their trade on us, shall we say. So that's just a ramble to say I look forward to the training. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Okay, and I did pass along to staff that at FCM, I did have a Richmond Hill council member come up to me and say they were absolutely flabbergasted to see that the town of Collingwood had a lobbyist registry, and they were so complimentary of that. And I know that our clerk is also doing some networking with some other parties. We've kind of pioneered the path for small urban municipalities. So congratulations to staff on that too. All right. So if there's no other question, oh, sorry. Mayor Hamlin, sorry. Thought I looked up there.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask Manager Truman a question really as a follow-up to Councillor Pott's question. I had understood that it's not council's responsibility to make sure that someone registers as a lobbyist. So, and that it may, behoove us to suggest that they register when we're meeting with them before or after. But there's no specific responsibility on a council member. Is that right? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, through you to Mayor Hamlin. The responsibility through our bylaw would be on the person being lobbied to make sure that they are advocating that they go through the proper process so that they sign up. So whichever public office holder that it is that's participating in the lobbying action, it is up to them to mention it and to make sure that they're aware that the program exists and to make sure that the name has been registered. And then, if you have to follow up with me because you don't see a name, that's completely appropriate.
So sorry, as a follow-up. So if someone comes to me to talk about something, it's my responsibility to make sure they register before I talk to them. Sorry, is that what you were saying?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mayor Hamlin. Yes, that's correct. It's up to the public office holder who's being lobbied to make sure that they're mentioning that the registry is there and available.
Mentioning it. Okay, thank you.
All right. So seeing no other questions then, we'll call a vote. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. So now that is going to bring us to 5.3, P 2023-19, Dormant File Closure, Staff Delegated Authority. I believe it's going to be Senior Planner Brian, but I will ask Director Valentine to introduce.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to provide some introductory remarks as Senior Planner Brian makes his way to the podium. Council is certainly aware, but for the benefit of those who may be watching via the webcast, the town is currently engaged in a development process and fees review, I should say, project. And the goals of that project are to streamline our internal systems, to create efficiencies where possible, build stronger relationships with our partners, and right-size resources and fees to provide better customer service and meet the expectations of our stakeholders and the public, as well as legislative timelines. The review will look at all of these objectives through the lens of the recent legislative changes at the provincial level, and those include Bills 109, 23, and now proposed Bill 97 that you heard about earlier in this evening's meeting. We anticipate that the review will result in a number of recommendations for council's consideration, but those won't be coming forward until later this year. In the meantime, a key legislative change through Bill 109 will come into effect as of July 1st, which is the required return of certain planning application fees if legislative timelines for decision are not met. So the report before you today represents a first step, or what we would consider a low-hanging fruit alteration to process, which we can initiate to mitigate these impacts of Bill 109, as well as realize the other benefits that are outlined in the staff report. So putting in place a process for the closure of dormant files would not only reduce the risk of appeals of non-decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but it also signals to the development community that the town is focusing resources on files that have the highest likelihood to move to construction in the near term. So Senior Planner Brian will certainly take you through a brief verbal presentation of the highlights of the report, go over the recommendation and the alternatives that we have suggested for council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Senior Planner Brian, take it away.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to provide council with an analysis and recommendations for a file closure process for planning applications which are currently or may become inactive or dormant. As background, the town has been dealing with an increased number of development applications over the past several years, including a number of which have become inactive. These dormant files create a number of challenges for the municipality, including a greater risk of costly appeals for non-decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal, as review of these files has typically exceeded legislative decision timelines, diversion of staff resources away from files which are being actively pursued and are more likely to generate results for the community, continuation of technical review, which is often dated in terms of provincial and municipal policies and regulations that were in place when the applications were made, and in the case of applications submitted after July 1st, 2023, greater susceptibility to new provincial fee refund provisions where decisions have not occurred in accordance with legislative timelines. Establishing a process to close dormant development files would help to address these challenges and would also help to better align the town's review process with recent provincial direction and also signal to the development community that the town's priority is also on development applications which can deliver timely and tangible results, and including increasing the supply of affordable housing. The file closure process envisioned would apply to Planning Act applications where no decisions or draft approvals have been given, such as official plan amendments, zoning bylaw amendments, site plan control applications, and proposed plans of subdivision or condominium. Dormancy would be defined as 4 months of applicant inactivity and would only be in situations where there were no outstanding actions required on the part of the town. Accordingly, staff are recommending that where 3 months of file dormancy is flagged, notification would be provided to the applicant indicating that substantive action is required within the next 30 days or the file will be closed. If no meaningful progress occurs and extenuating circumstances are not demonstrated, file closure would be issued to applicants. File closure correspondence would be issued to applicants, and the process to return any contingency deposit funds would be triggered. Where files are closed, applicants would need to reapply and would be subject to new approval timelines, fees, and the currently applicable policy and regulatory framework. Operationally, delegation of council authority for file closure to the Director of Planning, Building and Economic Development and their designate is being recommended, as this would capitalize on staff expertise and allow for a greater level of responsiveness given the time sensitivities which accompany development applications. For example, time periods for appeals to the Ontario Land Tribunal and refunding of application fees. Director and designate discretion would be an important part of evaluating a file for dormancy and closure, as there may be a number of mitigating circumstances to consider, including major market disruptions, applicant and/or consultant illness, and the complexity of technical issues. Director and designate discretion would also allow for consideration of dormancy and closure to be bumped up to council where appropriate or as requested by council. As currently envisioned, Planning Services proposes that the implementation of file closure be delayed for 3 months to allow for notice to the development community of the process change and for applicants to address file inactivity or voluntarily withdraw their dormant applications. Accordingly, Planning Services' recommendation is that Council enact and pass an amending bylaw to the town's delegation bylaw to provide staff the delegated authority to close dormant planning files, make the effective date for the amending bylaw September 5th, 2023, and that staff notify those with dormant files and the broader development community of the impending process changes. Planning Services notes that there are a number of alternative options outlined in the report for council consideration, which are supportable but are viewed by staff as being less effective than what is being recommended. 1. Implement a file closure process, but instead of delegating authority to the director and their designate, have council retain authority for file closure decisions. This would then entail staff bringing forward application-specific reports for council's consideration. While this approach could add a degree of openness and transparency, the additional time involved would increase the risks outlined in the report and would consume significant staff resources to write and present a series of reports annually. 2, modify the definition of dormancy from 4 to 6 months of inactivity, and this would allow the development community more time to adjust to the changes. This option would, however, increase the potential for a return of application fees given the generally shorter decision-making timelines involved. 3, modify the definition of dormancy from 4 to 2 months to further reduce the risk of appeals and fee refunds. However, this may prove to be challenging for the development community. 4, investigate charging a file reactivation fee after a defined period of dormancy rather than closing the development file. While this option might help to alleviate the impact of fee refunds, it would not address the other challenges that have already been outlined in the report. 5, allow an opportunity for consultation with the development community through the development process and fees review prior to making any changes related to file closure. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions or provide any additional detail needed on the options.
Okay. Thank you very much for that report. And we have no one online wishing to speak. We have no one in the gallery wishing to speak. So I will read the motion. And it is that staff report P 2023-19, dormant file closure, staff delegated authority, dated June 5th, 2023 be received, and that council enact and pass an amending bylaw to bylaw 2020-059, being a bylaw to delegate certain powers and duties to officers and employees of the town of Collingwood to provide staff the delegated authority to close dormant planning files, and that the effective date of the amending bylaw be September 5th, 2023, to provide the development community approximately 3 months to take action on dormant files or to request voluntary closure, and that staff notify the proponents with existing dormant files and the development community at large of the impending process change. A mover and a seconder, please. Vice Chair Doherty, Councillor Houston, and questions. I saw Councillor Baines, I believe. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to Manager Brian, did I mishear this, or did you say that if the file is declared dormant, you return the application fee to the applicant?
Through the chair to Councillor Baines, in most cases, if the file is determined to be dormant, it's probably, well, it could be past the time period for which fees would be refunded. I'm not sure what you're asking. I think.
Okay. Director Valentine.
Thank you. Through you to the chair. I believe Senior Planner Brian was making reference to what's called contingency fees. So these are funds that are accepted with an application fee, but they're separate and apart from the application fee. And those cover things such as peer reviews, legal reviews, other activities that are not covered by our standard application fee. So if there's anything remaining in that bucket that hasn't been spent, that is typically returned to the applicant in due course.
Great. So the application fee, because staff spent time reviewing this, regardless of whether it's declared dormant or not, would remain with the town then for the file itself?
Through the chair, the province has enacted changes that require us to refund application fees if the town doesn't make a decision in accordance with the new legislative timelines. Those provisions kick in July 1st. So everything that we've got in queue right now where we have received an application fee, those application fees would not be returned. It's only on a go-forward basis.
Thank you. Any other question? Oh, yes, Vice Chair Doherty, I saw your card. Go ahead.
Thank you. And through you to Planner Brian, very pleased to see this report come forward. We have been really, let me start all over again. We need to find a way to get back on top of our work in the planning department, and also to introduce some level of accountability from our development community, given that the 4 pieces of legislation that we've recently seen come from the province have really taken a lot of control away from us and planning for our community. So I'm very pleased to see this. I'm very supportive of the timelines, not only the timelines that you're suggesting here, but also the notion of perhaps reducing the timeline until dormancy can be declared as we go into the future. So reducing that time. The only issue that I'm having with this is doing this through delegation of authority to staff, because I just feel that most other planning applications do come before council. And this would be, fairly significant development for any particular file, and it would be appropriate, I think, that council should see it. Also, it would add a level of transparency to what we're doing. So, but I'm also struggling with the fact that I see that it would create more work for staff having to bring forward reports for each one. In conversation with Director of Planning Valentine, she mentioned the notion of bringing them forward as a batch report, similar to what we're doing with our water exemptions right now. So, perhaps that is a way to address it. But those are my comments. Very supportive, but not sure about delegating this to staff.
Comments or questions? Yep, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Chair Jeffrey. I have a similar concern about the delegation as well. But I guess the first question I would ask is, in a lot of cases when we get reports on something, and I guess the first statement I would make is I've no doubt at all that there needs to be some sort of process in place. And the suggestions, as you've outlined, there's a few options that we're being shown as to consider. But what's generally done in other communities? Are we inventing the wheel here? Is this something because of newer regulation and that, and it is where we're taking kind of the bull by the horns and trying to initiate our own, and so I just wondered because in many cases the developers deal with us and then they turn around and deal with other communities too. So generally is it through you, Chair, to Brian? I should have said
Senior planner.
Manager, senior planner. We always get the title problem. What is done in other communities that you're aware of?
Through Chair Jeffrey to the Deputy Mayor, I've got a few examples listed here. Mississauga has a 3-month inactivity file closure provision for their site plan control applications. They have a 6-month period for official plan and zoning bylaw amendments, as well as plans of subdivision. They were, at least from my research, they were the more aggressive of the municipalities. Other municipalities such as Oakville and Halton Hills, they have a 1-year requirement where they require an additional fee to be paid. And if the fee is not received within 30 days, then they move to close the file. Several other municipalities, they do a batch approach. So they probably at the instigation of council, but not on a regular basis, they have produced planning reports that would list off the files that would need to have file closure. Ajax has a 3-year file reactivation fee, and the District of Muskoka has a 2-year inactivity period for official plan amendments and subdivisions, and then delegated closure authority after that.
Thank you. And Director Valentine would like to weigh in.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just layer upon Senior Planner Bryant's response. We also had the fortune to run the general idea past our consultants undertaking the development process and fees review, and they indicated that some type of file closure process is common in most of the 25 municipalities that they worked with across Ontario, and that a number of municipalities, perhaps the ones that Senior Planner Brian had mentioned, are looking at tightening their timelines for dormant files in light of changes to Bill 109. So not unusual to have this process, but the shortening of timelines in terms of what is considered dormancy, you're hearing 1 year, 2 years, is likely to be revisited by many municipalities because of legislative changes.
Thank you. Councillor Baines?
Could I do follow-up?
Oh, do you have something specific to Director Valentine's, or the Deputy Mayor just wants to ask a question specific to that response?
Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it would just be follow-up, because I think that was the point I was trying to get straight in my head is, are we taking an aggressive approach, or probably something that's going to be kind of a norm approach? And I'm aware of what the staff has said, and that explains it for me. So I do have a couple of other questions, but if it's still in that same realm, certainly, Councillor Baines, go.
Yep, Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just saying that I'm quite in support of this initiative and would like to receive batch reports. But if for whatever reason we get in the glue 2 years out, we can perhaps roll it back to council, perhaps. But I think we need to take precedent-setting moves like this to make it easier for staff and for council, I think. So I'm fully in support of this. Thank you.
As presented.
As presented.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this, again, comes back to what Councillor Doherty spoke about a little bit earlier, a concern about if we do have it coming back and it puts more work onto the staff. I wonder if in this process we shouldn't be in turn putting more work onto the developer too. So I wondered about if there was a thought on the idea that if you gave them notice, if it's 3 months or 4 months or whatever we decide on, would there be the ability to suggest to the developer that in order to not run afoul in that period of time, they could simply ask for a month extension, or they could visit council and explain, because you mentioned about extenuating circumstances, and I think that's when I really want it to be council that's making that type of decision and not staff. So is there a consideration about the idea of kind of turning some work back to the developer and saying, if you want this file to keep moving forward, then you need to do some things here. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
Director Valentine is asking to respond.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. I I do hear what the deputy mayor is saying, and certainly understand the transparency and the decisions that council wishes to make. I would be somewhat concerned about developers coming on a one-off, with various different requests, with very limited guidelines around what should be, the decisions that should be advanced by council. So if there is concern with the delegated authority, I would strongly recommend the batch approach. That way we can have the developers come in a group and council can look at the applications and compare them and compare the various circumstances and make consistent decisions amongst the groups of applications.
Thank you for that.
If I may, Chair, I'd support and would like to make a recommendation in that regard then after.
When everybody's had a chance to make comment, including me, we'll get back to you. All right. C.O. Skinner, you had something you wanted to add? Right.
Thank you, Chair.
Take my chance.
I absolutely respect that council may wish to not delegate the authority or delegate it differently depending on the rest of the conversation. However, I did want to just think through with you the story that will be at play when these types of things happen. It's probably not like an approval where someone will go away happy that their development or substantially what they wish to do for their development will be approved. Some developers might not care. For good reason, their developments may not have moved for 3 or more months. Something might have happened. They may not actually wish to move forward further. Other ones will be quite disappointed. It's not an item of extensive flexibility and judgment in the sense that really it's about timeframes and whether there's something particularly extenuating that has happened. It doesn't commit the municipality to something. This is basically the absence of something happened. You're not going to have a subdivision that looks like X or Y. Frankly, this is about something not happening. The full flexibility would still exist to develop a site in a different manner. And there still exists in this proposal the ability for unusual things to be elevated to council. So if there was something that was extenuating or quite unusual, it could still come to council for a decision if it wasn't straightforward, although in this proposal it would be a staff judgment. And for those reasons, I do think based on its nature, it may be something that's well borne by staff to turn people back to rethink their proposals if in fact they haven't been able to move forward individually. However, we're absolutely, as the director had mentioned, open to developing a process that will work for you as council.
Thank you. All right. So I'm not seeing any other cards. Okay. Is it new? Brand new? Oh, why are you guys hanging on your cards the last minute? Okay, go.
No.
I saw Mayor Hamlin. You're after Councillor Doherty.
No, forgive me, but I do want to follow up on the CAO's remarks that, based on her comments, I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable with the notion. And I'm also in the back of my mind thinking about other situations where staff already have delegated authority with the Planning Act or any new instruments that have been introduced lately. But I'm wondering if that was the case, could we at least have a report that would come to council, say, once every 6 months, just to itemize itemize all of those files that may have been closed in the previous 6 months, just so that it is in front of council in the public domain and completely understood by everyone. So, okay,
Mayor Hamlin?
Feel better now.
Mayor Hamlin, you go ahead.
Yes, thank you. In the normal process, there's quite a bit of give and take back and forth and a lot of trust between planning staff and a developer and his or her consultants. I think the province in imposing on municipalities really short timeframes to approve applications with very little exception and maybe no exception has put us in a really difficult position, because we're going to be under the gun to issue approvals, but having no power to say, no, you haven't been done your part. There's some dormancy here, we've really got to protect ourselves. And I do think the other municipalities will step up and be looking at similar things. So I am in support of this. I do have a question of staff to please explain in their view, what does dormancy mean?
Senior Planner Brian?
Okay, through the chair to Mayor Hamlin, let me get my exact definition of dormancy. Dormancy would be defined as 4 months of applicant inactivity and would only be in situations where there were no outstanding actions required on the part of the town. So in that situation, the review process is underway, and we've had review comments from our agency partners, our departments, our peer review consultants, and that package has been forwarded to the applicant. Or if there's one item that's outstanding, that particular item has been forwarded to the applicant and it completes the review for that point in the process. And then we would be looking for a submission that responded to all of those outstanding comments, not a piecemeal submission, but a complete submission. And if that wasn't forthcoming, if it was delayed for whatever reason, then they would, after 4 months of inaction, then we would move to declare it dormant.
Is that follow up?
Yeah, thank you. So that's very helpful. So I guess, really, I guess the pressure is going to be on both the town and the development community to start producing the housing the province wants. In terms of the delegation authority, I'm quite content to have staff look after this issue. It will be what they're dealing with day to day. I'm not sure we can add a lot more. But I do like Councillor Doherty's suggestion that we have a report back. And maybe for the initial year, every 6 months would be good so we can see how things are unfolding. I tend to be one of those who thinks we're going to still see lots more legislative changes because there hasn't been enough thought given to some of these major changes, and they will have to, I think, tinker with them for it all to make sense at the end of the day. But this is where we are right now. We have to do what we can do, and I'm, as I say, happy to let staff lead the charge for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ring.
Just quickly, and I'm sure it was just answered, and then maybe I'm just confused a little bit with the answer. And the definition of the dormancy, it falls basically on the applicant more than the municipality, right?
Correct.
I mean, I think it can work both ways, but if we get an application, we ask for certain things to approve the application, and they sit on it for 4 months. I'm going to say most files will be considered dormant because the applicant didn't get back to us. Is that through you to?
Yeah, that's correct. I'm getting nodding heads. And Director Valentine, you want to add?
Yes, thank you, Chair. That's essentially correct. And we certainly didn't want to in any way penalize the development community if there was a delay on staff's end in some type of commenting response. So yes, it would be after, as Senior Planner Brian indicated, all of the comments from staff and the third-party agencies have been provided. 4-month timeline starts at that point. And I did also just quickly want to speak to Mayor Hamlin and Councillor Doherty's comments about a semi-annual update report, which is certainly doable. But also we already have a website set up which lists all of the staff delegated authority, which has been executed under the Planning Act right now, site plan approvals and condominium exemptions. So that's another way that council can keep tabs on any staff delegated decisions should that be the path you wish to take.
Okay. Yep.
Just quickly have a follow-up then. And I had some of the same concerns that Deputy Mayor Fryer and Councillor Doherty did with the idea of the delegated authority. But I'm less concerned now than I was before we started discussions. But just a quick question, and just for information purposes through you to Senior Planner Brian or Director Valentine. is this common practice in most municipalities that are exercising this, that there is a delegated authority?
Yeah, I will say that the Director Valentine and Senior Planner Brian commented that it is a practice, and we had some examples too. But it is a
No, I had the examples, but I just wondered if it's just those examples, or is it
no.
a real
I did hear Director Valentine
Okay, I'm sorry,
state
I missed that
no,
then.
that's
Sorry.
okay. Yep, no, it's good. All right, so is it new? Because if it isn't new, we're moving on. I want to say something.
I want to support, as I say, I do support the idea that something has to be done. I'm struggling with how it's being presented so far, but I like the idea of a 6 month or some sort of report. But if we look at the fact that at the end of the year there'll be an annual report that'll come to council. This is a brand new action we're going to be doing. Could it include any further recommendations on how it could be tweaked if you're finding difficulty with that or difficulty with this? Could it be that when we get that report for the rest of this year, it outlines the specific successes and any difficulties you've had and how those recommendations would be changed?
Thank you. And I do think staff committed to a review going into the future as to the things that could be honed
part of that,
going
right?
forward. That will be part of that. Yes, for sure. All right. So, and then before we either have an amendment or not, I want to comment that I don't, this is such a prescribed delegated authority that I'm really just not sure that this is a place for the political discussion. I think it's a very clear path for staff of the circumstances in which it is to be implemented. So I'm really quite comfortable with it as presented. So, but I do like the idea of the report, but I don't need another report if I'm going to be able to find it on the website as suggested by Director Valentine. So I'm not sure we need to add if someone wants to propose an amendment for that, that's specifically where the report, or if you want to add an amendment that the report comes here. That's up to you. Councilor Doherty.
Thank you. I will propose to add the amendment that we receive a report on files that have been closed semi-annually, at least for the first year. And then, of course, it is available online, but this way it's brought fully into the public domain.
All right. So, and I have a seconder in Councillor Baines. And Deputy Mayor, you wish to speak to the amendment.
Would you be comfortable with the idea of the end of year report at this stage, rather than necessarily saying at least for a year? I think that's what I would like to, I was planning on proposing, was that we do receive the report for the end of the year, the annual report for these 6-ish months. And it would then give us the opportunity then to ask if there's been any difficulties and if there is anything there. So would you be okay with just looking at the end of this year?
So, yeah, so what you're saying is because we're basically in June right now, that the first report would be at the end of this year. Yeah. So what are you suggesting that we make a decision whether we're going to ask for any more? Is that what you're suggesting?
At this stage, I was just looking for the end of the year report.
Okay.
So that's
I think they're one and the same. I think we're just playing with words. 6 months is the end of the year. So
yeah, that's right.
You can call it what you want.
Yeah.
But Councillor Doherty had talked at least for the next year. Talking, so that'd be 2 reports. That's the way I was looking at it.
Well, we can change it at the end of the year report if we deem something different. It's up to you.
I think I'd like to leave it as semi-annually, so that we would anticipate another report in June of 2024. But we can certainly, after having received the first report, we can certainly make a decision as to whether we want to see another one or not. Does that work?
All right, so we have our wording. Are you okay with that? Thanks. All right, so on the amendment, no other discussion. All those in favor? The amendment is carried. Thank you to our two on screen as well. And then the motion as amended, no further discussion. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much for that. Great discussion. And that brings us to, thank you, Senior Planner Brian. All right, so 5.5 is CO 2023-07, the Strategic Planning and Downtown Plan Next Steps. And CAO is going to introduce and then turn it over to Clerk Almus.
Thank you, Chair. Through many individual journeys, we find ourselves here together tonight in the beginning parts of a strategic planning journey. You as elected leaders, stakeholders, members of the public, and staff, we bring many individual experiences, expertise, points of view, and collectively, these are a key to a plan that resonates with us and into the future. I hope you feel inspired and some inspiration and a sense of being in a truly unique place with a unique history and people and ready to dream about what Collingwood is and what it can be. And that you're as excited as I am about it being community-based and steered by members of council and staff and possibly a number of community representatives. Someone who's in Collingwood 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 or 20 years from now will touch the outcomes of this strategic plan every day. They're going to drive our roads, ride their bike, I hope, to work, experience friendships and inclusion in recreation, in events and arts that build our social bonds, experience our post-development streetscapes, and enjoy ample clean water and more. I'm going to turn this over now to Clerk Almus. And hopefully with that kind of thinking in mind, who has our staff side leadership for the strategic plan. She's been supported by Executive Assistant Shelby Verkent and many others from staff. And we really look forward to your input today to confirm and get endorsement of the next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Skinner. I have to say, I'm the one really kind of helping put the pen to paper, but it collectively is a very well-led process through the CAO and through our department heads collectively with our support of Shelby Verkint. So the community-based strategic plan, if you want to go to the first slide, as indicated by CAO Skinner, is a vitally important guiding document which sets out and communicates Collingwood's vision and identifies important goals and objectives. This plan is actually the catalyst for plotting new directions and inspiring high performance. It is important for all councils at the beginning of their term to renew their priorities and work with the community in setting a strategic plan and identifying their vision for the council term and the future of the municipality. Collingwood's current 2020 to 2023 community-based strategic plan allows the new council time to get their feet wet and provide them with time to evaluate the priorities, listen to their constituents, and to determine the community's needs and visions moving forward. This report reviews various plans, the comprehensive report that's provided on the website. It talks about the various plans that Collingwood uses and how they interact with each other and recommends the next steps as council embarks on their strategic planning process with the community and focusing on a higher level approach in setting a vision, goals, and objectives. This higher level approach, and I played around with the terminology higher level approach, and I think it does need some clarification, will provide the direction needed to guide council's decision and staff's action while continuing with a number of these active plans and the proposed downtown visioning exercise. These will feed into more detailed work plans that will be included in various components and indicators as we move forward. Our next slide. Council indicated that it is very important for them that they work with the community to establish a strategic plan early in their term to properly guide the thoughtful decisions that will be required. As well, deep engagement with the community and a thoughtful review and update of the plan is desirable. Staff suggested that it is important that council understands that there are a number of important projects and items that are at play, and that council can articulate preferences to influence the overall rollout of the information they wish to have as decisions are made. So the interesting situation that we're in right now is, as you're fully aware, Collingwood, even though we're considered a small town, we're a high-performing municipality. Unlike a lot of our neighboring municipalities, with a lot of the complexities that municipalities our size may not have to work towards. So we have a number of master plans that are at play right now that's really going to feed into their next steps for our strategic plan discussions. We have the official plan. We have the Grain Terminals Revitalization Project that we talked about. We have the Phase 3 Arts and Culture Center conversation coming forward, the transportation master plans. And one of the key components that was identified near the end of the last council term was the impacts on some of these projects with regards to the future development of our downtown. And as you're aware, a number of these master plans are going to impact our downtown. So we've had a lot of conversation on the order and priorities of which items should come forward. And knowing that a lot of these master plans and key decisions that this council is going to have to consider in this term, and whether they want it to be part of their strategic vision and moving forward, is going to have to be determined in a really short term. So what we are planning, I think maybe our next slide, if we just get right into our recommendations. So the previous strategic plan have included specific and detailed work plans in addition to the vision, goals, and objectives. Staff have researched a number of municipal strategic plans and best practices, which range from very highly complex and detailed to plans that are more of an overarching community vision, goals, and objectives that are set. Understanding that Collingwood has a number of these significant projects and plans underway will impact the future decisions and resources, and staff believe the most appropriate beneficial strategic plan approach at this time includes an update of the vision in the addition of values and would further identify the key priorities or projects for action for us for the next 4 years. Staff are recommending up to 4 members of council assist in leading a steering committee together with key staff, with the opportunity to invite key stakeholders and or community members from time to time as needed to assist in the project as deemed appropriate. So if we combine a strategic plan together with a potential phased approach to move into a downtown visioning exercise that would ultimately lead us to a downtown plan, that would provide an opportunity for this council to take a look at those visions and priorities on an annual basis. Further to the vision of the community and priorities for action, which can be annually reviewed during budget deliberations to reflect the actions and key performance indicators that will be proposed in 2023 strategic plan. This approach will provide council the flexibility to pivot your resources and as determined most prudent, as they will align with the guidance of the higher level strategic plan. As discussed, mirroring this approach with the downtown visioning project and ultimately the downtown plan, this approach would be tied together with a thoughtful and cohesive downtown master plan. Combining the work of the strategic planning consultant and the downtown plan consultant would create efficiencies, eliminate redundancies that each consultant would be required to undertake in their environmental scan, background researches, community collaborations and engagement, ensure that there is an alignment in the future vision of the community as a whole and the vision of our vibrant downtown. It would also ensure that the timelines of the plans, should council decide to move forward with phase 3 of the arts and culture feasibility study. The next slide is a graphic image. It'll be hard to read for some maybe at home. So this is identifying what we're proposing. So it's bringing forward a strategic plan that would be done end of 23, early 24, with a lot of the background information if we're able to marry the two projects together with a downtown visioning and master plan. So pre-budget approval would be required as the additional work would be allocated from the 2024 budget. The estimated budget for both projects is expected to be in the range of $70,000, excluding the market research statistically significant survey, which is anticipated with an anticipated cost savings, quality and continuity improvements complying both these projects. So it is an additional $50,000 would be required from the 2024 budget to include this downtown plan. If there is a significant cost differential, staff would return to council for further consideration prior to award of the RFP for existing policies.
Okay. So, thank you very much for the presentations, Clerk Almus. I'm assuming we have no public input online and no public input to come from the gallery. So I will read in the motion that staff report CAO 2023-7 strategic planning and downtown plan next steps be received, and that council authorize proceeding with a request for proposal for the development of an effective high-level community-based strategic plan in a phased approach with the downtown visioning and plan development, and that council support establishing a steering committee that will include up to 4 members of council, key staff members, and stakeholders, community members, as deemed appropriate to assist in leading the market research survey and the development of the strategic plan and downtown plan. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Please, Councillor Houston, Councillor Potts, and questions. My first question, if I just could before we do the discussion, is could you identify for us where the public engagement occurs, please?
I am glad you brought that up, and I did actually miss that in my presentation. So I wanted to confirm, and when we did the agenda review, I knew this question was coming, so I should have been better prepared. So the proposal included in what we would be requesting from the consultants includes public consultation. So with the work with the steering committee together with the consultants that are chosen on this project, it would be proposed that, again, it could change from what they're recommending. They could provide additional, but it would include the input from the survey. So the survey input, we anticipate, and I should have that here, and maybe CAO Skinner might have it closer at hand, includes open houses, engage correspondence. There has been possible discussions on, the appropriate use of charrettes, farmers market work.
With the request for proposal, what we have in today talks about what we think is appropriate, and we left it somewhat open for the consultant to also bring their expertise in public consultation, but it also included some initial input from the community around the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and the trends. And I believe Councillor Jeffrey had mentioned something previously around political, social, and other trends in the community and the larger world. As well, we were looking at potentially an initial review of certain groups of stakeholders. There's people in the community, for example, that already have certain areas that they're interested in. The climate change or arts communities might be some that are examples, but certainly not an exclusive list. And we also thought that once there was an initial long list of potential priorities that council could consider, that there would also be, or for that matter, draft visions and draft values put together, that there would be a second round of consultations such that the community could not only provide the initial input, but also once council had a look at that original input and what it was shaping up to be, that the community could also comment on the directions that council thought it might want to take.
Thank you. And then just to clarify, when the steering committee is kicking in terms of that's not developing what's going into public consultation, correct?
We thought that the steering committee would be formed somewhat soon because there are some questions, for example, for the public survey and that kind of thing that we need to figure out how to form up. And we did think that the steering committee would be helping us to refine with the consultant things like the types of consultations that would occur and maybe some initial sorting of some of the information that that comes back, not to adjust the summaries, but perhaps help us to provide focused recommendations to council.
Okay. All right. Questions, comments? Councillor Houston.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I'm wondering if a slight amendment might be appropriate. I know that in the recommendations it says key staff members and stakeholders and community members, but I'm just wondering, given the significant interest that the downtown BIA has in the development of the downtown plan portion, and the fact that they're undergoing their own strategic plan, knowing that there should likely be some close alignment between those two things, I'm just wondering if adding in the BIA's general manager and or the chair of their improvement committee might make sense. It may already be assumed under key staff members and stakeholders, but I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to specifically identify that.
Okay, thank you. I think that's probably very appropriate. How we word it is, it's their decision, right? Okay, I'll let the clerk respond.
Thank you. I'll just quickly respond to that. Since this proposal to have a steering group acknowledged through the project, it's definitely, we wanted to have the BIA board represented, or whether it's the general manager or the board represented, and obviously specifically to the downtown plan component of it. I think they'll be very valuable stakeholders in the overall community plan as well. But it is anticipated, so a potential amendment we could include, if you would like some wording.
I was thinking along that the BIA be invited to participate along that line. Okay. Yeah. Okay. You're okay with that amendment? Okay. Seconder for the amendment, Councillor Baines. Okay, and we'll just vote on that amendment for right now. All those in favor? And that amendment is carried. Thank you for bringing that to our attention, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey, or Chair Jeffrey, sorry. I'm just going to repeat myself, I think, a little here. I'm supportive of the extensive work we do towards community-based strategic planning and the public input that we take in and everything like that. But I do feel the missing element of all this is that we do not have a long-term financial plan. That I do think we have to continue to get working on that, and then when we have groups like this involved, they'll know some of the parameters we have to work with in regards to what can be done and possibly what can't. So it's just a reflection on that, that I do believe we need to keep moving forward on getting that long-term financial plan outlined.
All right, good. CEO Skinner.
Just briefly, I just wanted through the chair to say that really was the intention. We do have it already on our operational plan, a long-term financial plan noted as something that should be delivered. And one of the reasons that we wanted, and we were struggling with the language of the high-level strategic plan, was that we wanted it to be fully consulted and to be capturing any of the directions that council would like to take, but the detailed individual projects, other than the very large ones, and the financial implications of those would be revisited each year by council because of how important it is to have that, in year by year and long-term financial plan in your hand as a decision maker.
Good
point.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay. Mayor Hamlin.
Yeah, thank you. I am in favor of this recommendation as amended. I also wanted to recognize the importance of what's been proposed in the sense of the visioning for the downtown being moved up to coincide and overlap a bit with the strategic planning exercise. For those people I speak with who are thinking about our community, where it's going, often the discussion is our downtown. And I think a lot of people are eager to get engaged in that discussion. Also, I attended a meeting recently with a few of the board members of the BIA, and they are chomping at the bit to get going on the visioning for downtown. So try not to have them get too far ahead of us. And so I'm glad we've concluded. We'll invite them to our exercise. Thank you.
Report, you show a sum total budget, $75,000 roughly, excluding the market research statistically significant survey. So are we treating that as separate? Or does it inform the strategic plan development and the downtown visioning?
Theo Skinner?
Thank you. Through the chair. So it's a separate company because this was a very specific piece of expertise, sort of the that statistically significant surveying. We do have have received the bids. We do think it would be best if the consultant for the strategic plan was engaged before we set all the questions. Because we think that first round of, what are the important questions and having that dialogue with council would be best placed with both of those consultants being present. So it is paid for separately, but we're hoping there will be some links if we can arrange that.
Okay. And in my own mind, to follow up, in my own mind, I do see that it will and it should form the basis of our own strategic plan development. The other comment I would make is that if we are also working on a downtown visioning, that some of the questions should definitely specifically deal with downtown. I admit I would never have thought of doing it this way, but.
Councillor Baines?
Thank you, Chair Jeffrey. Through you, I suppose, to the clerk. If the first one was, well, not the first, the latest one was 2020 to 2023, is this envisaged to be 3 years, or could it be longer? Or has that been determined?
I believe it has been scheduled to be 4 years. So generally, we like it to overlap with the first year of the next council term, just like you are having the opportunity right now as a council to kind of understand, what the constituents have shared, get your feet wet into how our engagement processes work, and really have a feel for budgeting and planning in general with all the plans that you've been dealing with. So it is proposed as a 4-year plan at this point.
That's great. I think 4 years is perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm seeing no other questions, so we'll vote on the motion as amended. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. So that is the end of our staff report. So that takes us to our departmental updates, and we'll start with Director Valentine at 6.1 on the OLT appeal updates. Please.
Thank you, Chair. Today we have a very brief update regarding 3 active appeals to the Ontario Land Tribunal. The first is with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision for 452 Raglan Street. The appeal by the applicant, which is Eden Oak, for a non-decision remains scheduled for hearing at the end of July of 2023. A revised submission was received from the appellant in March, and the technical review from staff, our consultant, third-party agencies, as well as peer reviewers has been completed. The matter did return before council on May 29th, and staff, the town's consultant, and the town solicitor are now in the process of implementing the direction that was provided on that date. Second update is regarding the Ontario Land Tribunal appeal by Consulate Developments, Inc. This is for, again, a non-decision regarding a zoning bylaw amendment to increase the density for a proposal known as Bridgewater on Georgian Bay. This matter did also return to council in camera on May 8th, and the scoped hearing took place on May 17th and continued for 3 days. As directed by council, evidence on behalf of the town was provided by Jim Diamond, who is our professional planning consultant, and legal support was provided by Miller Thompson. We do understand that a number of members of the public did attend that virtual hearing as well. There was no verbal decision that was rendered by the OLT tribunal member, which is not unusual for complex matters, so we do await a written decision. This can take several weeks, up to months, depending on the nature of the application and the resourcing of the tribunal. Once decisions are made and are provided in written format, they are publicly posted, and we will also advise council once we do receive that notice of decision. Then lastly, as CAO Skinner noted in her recent update to council regarding the water capacity and land use planning policy study, there is only one outstanding appeal that, once fully resolved, will allow the interim control bylaw to be lifted. Though council had previously provided direction on settling the appeal in camera, staff have run into some implementation challenges that do need to be addressed by council. So staff proposed to bring this matter forward in camera on June the 12th. Thank you, Chair. That concludes my update.
Thank you. So I don't think there's any questions. That was pretty succinct. Thanks. All right, so next up is 6.2, the homelessness updates by Director Collver. Thank you, Director Collver.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks to you, Chair. Yeah, so I was, we'll go right to the beginning there. Perfect. I was asked to provide a little bit of an update on behalf of the organization. I think it's sort of based around the idea that there seems to be, as we do a lot of conversation and there's a lot of attention paid to affordability in housing and attainability in housing, there seems to be some emerging confusion of the overlap between homelessness and attainable and affordable housing. So this little presentation is sort of just to make sure that we're all on the same page and organized and understanding where the problems are and what's being done and who's sort of taking prime leadership and roles with it. So to begin with, it's no surprise, I don't think to anybody, that homelessness is a growing concern in Collingwood. It's not new, but it's definitely increasing. The pandemic definitely exposed and we saw a dramatic increase in homelessness throughout the pandemic period. And what's really important to know is that the county is the principal government organization responsible for addressing homelessness. As much as we see it on our streets and we feel it in our daily lives, it is something that the county has leadership of. They receive all of the provincial funding and distribute it accordingly. And while the town maintains a strong relationship with Busby South Georgian Bay, they are an agent of the county. Next slide, please. So it's important to understand the distinction between homelessness and affordable or attainable housing. They're both serious challenges in our community and many communities across the country and beyond. They're happening concurrently, but often have very different points of origin. There's a relationship between the two, because in so much as the absence of a supply of housing eliminates the possibility of moving from unhoused to housed, when we lump them together, we actually oversimplify the root causes of homelessness and may create obstacles towards developing solutions for either challenge. It also blends the responsibilities, which can have the effect of diluting the responsibilities. So it's really important for us to see them as distinct issues, even though we know that they're related. The next slide. So you've seen this image before, and it's definitely a really good one because it shows the continuum. It shows the point at which homelessness intersects with housing and housing affordability. The diagram also, this one particular, shows the delineation of governmental responsibility for actions in our region. It's not to say that Collingwood doesn't have a role in supporting responses to homelessness at all. That's not at all what I'm saying. But it does help to clarify that there are roles in who leads each of these discussions and how the funding priorities get set, given that this is the way things currently are. Next slide. So currently and recently, our rules look like this. We have regular meetings. CEO Skinner implemented some regular meetings with the county, Busby, and agency groups that all have an action approach to managing homelessness in our community. This has been great in terms of information sharing. We've had multiple members of the county organization come and tell us about different challenges they're facing, processes they're struggling with, the funding issue, which has been a huge issue. We actually continue to offer our support. So if planning support is needed, we've worked with Director Valentine and her team to sort of say we're ready, and this is how long it takes us to move through planning processes if there was a shelter that needed to be established in Collingwood, and how would we do that, and what are the processes that would have to be covered, and how quickly could we do that. Something else that's been recent has been council support of the Busby Emergency Shelter, which in 21 and 22, especially in 22, helped it to stay open longer than it would have been under the provincial and county funding model. Next slide. With our regular check-in communications with Busby, they've shared that though they're only funded for winter emergency sheltering, their board has actually provided extra funding to maintain emergency services until the end of June, till the end of this month. They're currently at full capacity in their current accommodations. They're serving 10 individuals and one family on site, as well as maintaining one male and one female bed for OPP referral. That OPP relationship, by the way, which is really, really important, it's been very collaborative and very, very strong. It helps to support such initiatives as the mental health response team or response unit, and other things that the OPP are doing as they also try and play their role in this challenge. We're also all really looking forward to the impacts of the recent provincial announcement for funding. So there's more than $21 million to be spent inside of Simcoe County on homelessness prevention and response. We're looking to see how that's going to roll out, and we're also doing our best to advocate for the needs of our area. Next slide. And Busby South Georgian Bay continues to be the primary provider for mobile outreach. And this is a really important service in the community because this is where we meet people where they are. This is where we go to the places where homelessness exists, and we talk to them. I shouldn't say we, they talk to them about pathways to intervention, pathways to getting the help they need, the supports to deal with any of the vast array of complex issues that have brought them to this place. So it's probably one of the most important things that Busby provides. It goes a little under the radar because the shelter is such a strong focus, but the outreach program is actually incredibly important in our community. Our staff, your staff, Town of Collingwood staff, continue to train on response and recognition of supports. We're looking at different things that we need to do in order to be the best service providers we can be in the community when it comes to addressing homelessness as a condition of our community. We participate, actually, this mentions SCADA, but there are a number of roundtables that your staff are a part of. And each of them has a role and a distinct area that they're working to address and help out. And a lot of that has to do with homelessness response. SCADA is specifically brought together for the purpose of fighting homelessness. We also carry on a strong relationship with the Busby Center Foundation. And again, this is about the idea that, a permanent remedy has to be somewhere in the future. And the foundation is working very hard at it, and we're looking to support them in any way we can, and also to just be very aware of all the different vectors and ways to navigate the challenge. Next slide, sorry. So for next steps, the group that CAO Skinner had assembled that meets regularly, we're actually looking to try and start pulling in some of our surrounding communities who we know are experiencing the same conditions we are, but it creates a stronger advocacy position for us when it comes to some of that $21 million and making sure that the needs are seen and heard. It also makes sure that we are collaborating properly because a lot of our organizations overlap these communities, and so we understand the issues in a wider field. We always continue and to make sure that the county is aware of our needs in the community. They've recently delivered a study, which I know the mayor and deputy mayor would have seen, and probably the rest of council as well. And we're looking forward to sort of seeing how that information gets implemented to better serve the community. And I've already mentioned the advocacy. We know that funding is the biggest issue. And so really we're just making sure that we're seen because it's really, really important, and we all know it's a problem here in our neighborhoods. And I will just finish by saying Busby is always looking for funding. So staff, council, members of the public, if there's anyone out there who can help lend dollars or periodically they are looking for volunteer support as well. They do great work. It's really, really difficult work. And they have my respect, so I want to make sure that they get a pitch for any support that anybody can give. So that's pretty much the update I had planned, but I'm happy to try and answer any questions if there are any.
That's great. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? The Deputy Mayor and then Vice Chair Doherty.
Thank you, and really appreciate the update and all staff's efforts. I know it's a tremendously difficult thing to be working on. A couple of the slides, the points you made in the slides is you talked about the increase in funding for this year, and I've reported to council that the county is looking at how to take that increased funding and determine how to best maximize the benefit of it. But I think for sure one thing that'll come out of it is a measure of reporting back to give them the ability to determine efficiency and effectiveness of services being provided by the different resources that are being used. And I think that's an important element of it to try to make sure that we're getting the best bang for the buck. So we'll continue, the mayor and I will continue to take forward at the county level the fact that another point you make is we're the one area that doesn't have an emergency shelter. And I really like the idea of including the region in your discussions because if it's determined that there can be something done, the location of it has to be the right location because we don't want to be in a situation where we're attracting the transient situation. We want to be dealing with the existing population we have, and so when we're at the county level, we're looking at it, and I know I'm thinking of it from a regional kind of basis, but it stands out to me that this area does not have an emergency shelter, and we'll be making sure that we understand from the county perspective what is the best mechanisms to maximize, but we want to know that we're getting into our area too to solve some of the problems we have. So thank you for the report.
Vice Chair Doherty, you were next, and then Councillor Baines, and then Councillor.
Yes, thank you very much for the report. Between that report and the one that's recently been released by the county, it does provide a better sense of confidence that the money that the town is allocating to Busby is not just going away. That there is some element of accountability, and certainly when we see the county's increase in funding trickle down to our area, then we should see even more immediate impacts. I do have a question, whether the individual folks who are experiencing homelessness, are they being tracked by name so that they're not just, appearing in a bed one night and then they disappear and we don't know what happened to them. And like it.
Yeah. So through you, Chair, I don't know that I can comment on by name. I know, from speaking with Sarah at Busby that, there is a community that they understand. So yes, I'm sure that the names are familiar to them. I thought where you were going to go was the question is, are they being statistically tracked? So there's HIFAS data and there's other data that's collected to kind of understand what the current conditions are, sort of organizationally across their spectrum of care. Yeah. But I honestly can't comment on whether they're tracked by name.
I guess that's what I meant, was whether are they being, tracked? Are we seeing some, element of impact or success for the interventions that have been made or that they have taken advantage of? Because that's the best way to ascertain whether what we're doing is having a real impact on homelessness.
Yeah, I mean, through you, Chair, I believe that I know they're statistically managing and monitoring, who's appearing at shelters, who they're reaching out to through outreach. I would say that, at a human level, we're seeing that there is a positive action happening. There's more understanding in terms of what we're seeing at a staff level, at a front line level. It's not as hard to approach a person experiencing homelessness as it probably would have been a few years ago. And in approaching them, we're making contact and being able to provide them with, help. And that help can be anything from a bottle of water to, guidance, to making them aware that Busby's resources exist, to simply just seeing them as humans, and then they move on and they had an experience of being seen as a human. So that kind of progression, I think, has been very, very positive. It's hard to kind of talk about that in light of rising numbers of homelessness, but I think that that's a positive impact, and I give credit to people like Busby and, even our own staff group who are kind of trying to really understand and train ourselves to be part of solutions wherever possible.
Thank you. I'll also just add that in addition to advocating for a shelter, emergency shelter for this community, because people from smaller communities will gravitate to larger communities. It's just a reality. So that is what we can expect in the town of Collingwood. The other opportunity, I think, that needs to be explored, that is seeing some real success in other communities, is transitional housing. And we're seeing tremendous successfully implemented programs in Vancouver and other major cities in BC. And now we're seeing even in the province of Ontario and the city of Kitchener, where transitional housing enclaves have been established that are having real favorable impacts on the folks that are coming in to take advantage. So I'm hoping that we also can consider that as part of a solution.
Yeah, so through you, Chair, transitional housing is a really important component on that continuum, that diagram that you've seen before. I will say that the focus right now in terms of what I've been talking about in this presentation is on the emergency support. You're absolutely right, and within the county's purview, there is a spectrum, and that spectrum includes everything from emergency shelter through transitional shelter, housing supports, all the way through to the part that we occupy, which is affordability, and then onward, right? I mean, the ideal is that there is an entry point and a continuation. So what I've been talking about is the emergency end of the spectrum, and it comes with understanding and working through a lot of those very complex root causes. And So while I understand and want to make sure that I'm supporting, because I love that we're using that phrasing, because that phrasing does represent a really important part of the spectrum. I also want to make sure that we're not deviating focus from where we're discussing right now, which is this emergency end of the spectrum. The transitional has a P, almost an explicit and important piece of the puzzle, the entry point, as it were.
Yeah.
And CAO Skinner.
Thank you, Chair.
Yep, CAO Skinner wanted to add a comment, and then I've got Councillor Baines and Councillor Ring.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, I was glad that Director Collver mentioned that we're not the lead for the transitional housing and those other pieces, but we have done a lot to put social services roundtables and, zoning and advice and those kinds of things together. One thing that we do want to advocate for, and it's related to the new hospital potentially as well as other funding pots, is the idea of getting at the root cause, that if someone needs mental health and addiction supports, not only would they be able to go to an emergency shelter, but hopefully we can find the ways to find them beds in places where they're going to get the types of helps that are really required. What I really wanted to comment on was that the county, in my last meeting with them, did indicate as part of their new funding, they had intended, pending some approvals, to hire additional people, and they've already started some live data with respect to counting and enumeration by name, where names are available. And finally, I didn't want to not acknowledge that there are a number of other not-for-profits in the community providing support to homeless folks. And I know Councillor Potts and a number of others have been engaged in giving on that front, along with other members of the community. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Chair Jeffrey. Through you to Director Culver. Recently at a training session at, really by Simcoe County, the manager of this file for the county said, based on a survey that he was quite confident about, that Simcoe County had a total of 733 unhoused. I asked him whether he could give us the numbers for Collingwood. He didn't know, but he said he could come up with them. But do you have any idea on what the number of unhoused are in Collingwood?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I wouldn't put a number on it. I don't have that number. And, that's a number that we can definitely try and determine through our relationship with Busby and others. I get worried about numbers.
So do I. I thought the number 733 was extremely low for all of Simcoe County.
And that's kind of the problem, is that it's a bit of a fluid concept. We were hearing about encampments that had 50 or 60, and then, I visited and there'd be a few. Now, there might have been 50 or 60, I don't know, but that's my point, is it's kind of fluid. And it also kind of starts to relegate people a little bit. So I get a little nervous about talking about explicit numbers. I think what we know is we have a capacity problem to deal with those emergency situations. There are people who are sleeping on the street in dangerous situations, and it would be better if they weren't, and that's what we need to be working towards. So,
thank you.
Well put. Excellent. Councillor Ring.
Thank you very much, Chair Jeffrey. Through you to Director Culver. There's never enough finance or never enough funding. I realize that, and every situation, we need more money to help out or try to alleviate the problem. I know we don't have an emergency. I'm just wondering why. Has the county ever give us a reason why there's no emergency shelter funded here through the county, as opposed to Midland, Aurelia? Everybody else seems to have one but us, and because I'm assuming that we're in dire straits here with the homeless as well. And the second part I'd like to ask is even the funding we do get, is it like where it goes towards what, the rental of the motel to be used for emergencies during the cold time through the Busby Center? Because I'm wondering if it is, how much are they really funding? Because I know we give through the municipality to Busby Center, and are we just paying for our own facility? I'm just wondering.
So two parts to that question. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, can you help me with the first part? Because that one, I had a solid answer. On the second one, I'm struggling with a bit. The first,
I'm going to have to think of what I shouldn't have done it.
Apologies, my brain's not working.
You started out by asking why the other municipalities all had an emergency
And
shelter.
why wouldn't, what's the rationale? Have you ever got the rationale why there's not an emergency shelter in Collingwood?
Yeah, so through you, Chair, I honestly, I'm not equipped to sort of give you the definitive answer. I do know that, prior to the pandemic, the town actually contributed funding towards a study that showed we didn't need a shelter at all, that we could make do with sort of outreach and overnight, out of the cold winter. Everything changed in the pandemic. The numbers went from single digits to double digits to high double digits, and so it could be that the problem came upon us so quickly that we haven't caught up to the fact of, doing that pretty complex job of getting a shelter built. But I honestly, I don't know that that's the definitive answer. I think it's a very, very good question, but I don't know that I'm equipped to give you the definitive answer, other than to say things have changed really, really fast. Like everything in Collingwood, we've changed so fast. That's a possible rationale to be used. And then your second part of the question, I will ask Councillor Jeffrey to help me remember again.
It was the funding part. Like I know what we've put towards Busby annually, and what are we getting back for it? Just the money we put in is basically we funding our own Busby Center here.
So through you, Chair, I wouldn't say as much as this funding that had been provided by Council in 2021 and 2022 was substantial funding. I can't say that it funded Busby. It funded Busby at times more than what the county was able to provide through their distribution model. And like I said earlier, that's kind of allowed and helped the Busby to stay open longer, especially this past winter. As of right now, their funding model for the emergency shelter situation is done in the winter. So right now they're open based on their own foundation, like their own board. So the tax dollars are gone. The county money that's not part of the program that keeps them open in the summertime. So they're working with their own Busby money. I actually don't. I talked to Sarah today, Paddle, the executive director, and I don't actually know what happens after the end of June as of today. But I know they'll keep trying to figure out how they can provide as much support as possible to homelessness in Collingwood. And as I mentioned earlier, too, something that should not be overlooked in the effort to sort of understand or have a desire for a permanent, bricks and mortar solution, is the outreach service that they provide. It's really, really important that continues because, like I said, that's where you go to meet people where they are versus hoping that they'll be at your door looking for that help. Sometimes you have to go in and be there where they are. And that will continue. That will continue past the end of June and all through the summer. The big question we all have right now, and I mean everybody, is what happens in November. So I don't have that answer today. I know a lot of people are working on it, and we're going to keep trying to listen and remain in dialogue with the county to see what we can do.
So I have Councillor Potts. Did your point get covered, Deputy Mayor, specific, just briefly?
If I could, I was just going to say, I do definitely think Director Collver hit it right on the head. That prior report indicated that Collingwood wasn't in a crisis situation. It's been well said to the county since I've been involved and through the CAO and the meetings we've had and the mayor. It's being conveyed to the county that we are in a crisis situation, and so they're well aware of that there was probably some sort of a significant change in Collingwood's situation, and I just wanted to say that we'll be taking the message, continuing that message forward, that we are in that situation and we need to, it needs to be dealt with.
Okay, thank you for that. And thank you for your patience. Councillor Potts, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Jeffrey. So perhaps this may not be the appropriate time, but and potentially shooting for the stars. But what would it take, or what would the process be if we could potentially look at whether it's a piece of municipal property that we could put some buildings on it, where, you know, and I use kind of like school portable style structures on that we could, you know, try to maybe be a municipal leader and take control. You know, I continuously hear that there's funding and it's, you know, county driven, or they overlook it all. But I think that the problem's still here, and, you know, you want to be positive, but you think it's going to be, you know, many months, years down the road. And I just think that we should grasp this and take our own charge and show that we do care and support it. And so I don't know what the process would be or how we get there, but I would certainly be interested in learning more.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I think our theme is that maybe you can consult with Director Collver and the appropriate staff to flesh out your idea a little more. I know I saw some pretty amazing units at FCM's trade show that municipalities are using and putting on municipal lands to facilitate that transition to get them to safety and then on to transitional housing. CEO Skinner?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that there's a really strong desire to act. I'm very reluctant to step into the county's role with respect to homelessness. I'm very happy for us to advocate with the county, particularly given the amount of funding that they've just received. So the idea of something like that being here, as Councillor Potts was describing, is exciting, that we would have a place for people to go. I'm reluctant in the context of all the things that are in your core basket that we try to get in front, even though there is some cachet with being that type of municipality who really just acts. But I think that we're on the cusp of asking the county to find some solutions. And if we work through the deputy mayor and the senior staff there, then we might be able to push some of the things that Councillor Potts is suggesting. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's what I was thinking, that staff will be able to direct you to the correct resources in terms of being able to either advocate for it or...
Sorry, if I could also just add that, please. You know, and Councillor Potts is absolutely correct with, you know, urgency and you know, we need solutions now. I think the good news is that what's being expressed here is an appetite by council to see solutions happen as fast as possible, which will have a play in things like planning processes and whatnot that'll help those things to happen. And, you know, people like the Busby Board and others have done a lot of groundwork to look at modular homes and modular applications that could be applied. Property has been, you know, discussed. But I think to CEO Skinner's point is we're trying to make sure that we're as ready as possible so that when the county does what we think that they need to do, what they're suggesting that might ultimately happen, that we're ready and poised. So it's absolutely great to have council, you know, thinking this way and eager and demanding actually that, you know, action happens ASAP.
Exactly right. Okay. I think that concludes our comments. I would only finish with an interesting one I heard from our Burlington colleagues at FCM was the feds have the money, provinces the power, and municipalities have the problems. And we're trying to work through adjusting that municipal financial framework. So we're working on it. All right. Thank you very much, Director Collver, for that. And so that brings us to our final departmental update, which we added, and it is Director Slama on the on-demand transit service. Welcome, Director Slama.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for allowing this department update to be added to the committee agenda this evening. So this update relates to the implementation of the on-demand transit service. The on-demand service is scheduled to commence this weekend, and the original plan was to have the transit service operate only through the on-demand platform on the weekends, with the conventional routes not running on the regular schedule. So based on the observation of enrollment in the on-demand system and listening to what we've been hearing from our regular transit units, our users, the town is going to pivot the phased-in implementation of the on-demand system slightly. We're lucky that the on-demand platform allows for some flexibility, and we can adapt how we provide the service to meet the needs of our community without constraining our services. And being adaptive to the rider base shows our commitment to ensuring the continuity of service, especially during the start of the implementation of the on-demand platform or service. So starting this weekend, which is June 10th and 11th, and going forward on Saturdays and Sundays, 2 buses will operate to provide the conventional transit routes as usual. And along with these 2 buses on the conventional routes, we'll have 1 bus that will be operating to provide the on-demand service. So this will allow users to access a conventional bus at the bus stop and times that they are used to using, and it will also provide an opportunity for the users to try the on-demand system, maybe for one leg of their trip or their route, and hopefully overall the idea is to reduce their overall trip time. So this adjustment will be communicated to the public and users through our various forms of communication. So that'll be our customer service, the website, social media channels, and also with a radio program that council members participate in on Wednesdays. And we'll also be providing this message on the buses and posted at the transit terminal and some of the bus stops. If anyone is interested in further information on the on-demand service, or if there's questions about signing up or how the system works, information can be accessed through the town's customer service division and the town's website. So thank you, and that's all I have for our update this evening.
I don't think there should be any questions. Are there any questions on that? No. Okay, that's great. Thank you, Director Slama. Have a nice evening. So now we're at number 7, reports and minutes of other committees and boards. That the minutes of the following committees and boards be hereby received and recommendations contained therein be approved. Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting April 2023, Museum Advisory Committee meeting April 2023, and Museum Advisory Committee meeting May 25th, 2023. There are 2 recommendations under 7.2 that council approve the terms of reference for the Museum Advisory Committee, and under 7.3 minutes that council approve the Collingwood Museum public programming policy. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Potts, Councillor Houston, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Yes, unanimously. Forgot to look up. Brings us to the consent agenda, number 8. That the general consent agenda be herein received, and further that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are that of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. 8.1, letter to council re the municipal accommodation tax by South Georgian Bay Tourism. Have a mover and a seconder to receive those. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Baines. Nobody wish to pull one. We'll vote then for receiving. All those in favor? As carried unanimously. And does anyone want to discuss 8.1? Seeing none, we're done there. 9, other business. We have a motion. The mayor and the CAO's forum is a motion read transit. And does the mayor wish to read this in?
Sure, I'll do that. That the mayors and CEOs forum, see, did I miss something at the beginning? No, that's the beginning. Okay. That the mayors and CEOs forum members bring the following motion to our respective councils and forward once endorsed to the 2 counties and MTO. So all this is saying, of course, is that we had this discussion at a recent meeting of the South Georgian Bay mayors and CAOs. And we're each taking this to our council. So here's the motion. Whereas transit provides multiple benefits, including access to healthcare, necessities, and a reduction in greenhouse gas production, be it resolved that Council asks Simcoe and Grey County Councils to prioritize and resource an integrated, conventional, and accessible transit system across Simcoe and Grey counties, and with connection to GTA routes, including consideration of a single linked pass system, and support a delegation of South Georgian Bay mayors and CAOs to the county councils and an AMO delegation, including provincial MPPs, to the Ministers of Transportation or MMAH. And further, that the counties provide a brief status report, including current available data and next steps that can be circulated to local municipal councils by the end of 2023. And not May, sorry, by the end of 2023. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So you'll move your motion and have a seconder, Vice Chair Doherty. And do we still, just from the clerk, do we still need, including the delegation, we already voted earlier to do that? Or is it because it's a fixed motion from another entity? Just doesn't matter. Okay, all right. Any questions or discussion with respect to this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Public delegations.
Thank you, Chair. And I actually would be remiss to note that we did have one of our volunteer vice chair of our Museum Advisory Committee on board during that presentation. So she hung on just in case there was any questions. I'm sure she's very grateful, but it was Alison Hunwicks. So she has left for now. So she was the one attendee and we don't have anyone at this time.
Okay, so we don't have any public delegations this evening.
I meant to mention something other business.
Oh, sorry. Did I? Oh, yes, you did tell me you were going to, and I forgot. Where is? Oh. The consent agenda.
Chair's motion was under other
Oh,
business.
right. Sorry. Yes. Yes, please. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
And all I'm going to do here is just, I had a conversation because of the prep work I did with the CAO and the clerk earlier today. And it had been intended, we've started a practice of providing information to the public and actually to councillors too, of the planned items that we have coming to Council of the Whole. And what happened was the financial statements were targeted for today. So I understand what happened. The public doesn't really. And what we did talk about was when it's an element like this, and I totally support that the CAO decided to pull it, there's going to be the times where time is going to be a factor as well, not just what happened in this particular circumstance. So I was just making the suggestion that when we don't have a particular element coming that we kind of forecasted to come, it probably would be a good idea when the agenda goes out to somehow notify that. And I'm leaving that to staff's discretion on how they figured that out. But I know I was looking for it, and then I wondered whether maybe I wasn't looking in the right place to find it, and that type of thing. So it was just in this particular case, it had to do with the statements. The CAO explained to me that they came in just the other day, and I guess it would have been like the Monday and the Tuesday would have, it just too much, too little time and that. So this is just letting the other member councils know that when we have something down on that list and it's not going to come forward, we're going to probably give some a notice as to that happening, and you'll be aware of it as you plan your looking at to the agenda.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable for all of us doing time management in our busy lives to have advance notice when things are going to come off the list. Okay, great. Acknowledged.
I'm just going to quickly add, this is a pilot project. We agreed to put an agenda management on there on the website, publicly posted, saying things are subject to change.
Yeah.
So,
But I do think for council members who are trying to plan meetings and their time commitment, that as best you can do would be great. That's all. Best efforts. That's all we're asking. Best efforts. All right. Great. And that's it for other business. Sorry, I should have asked if anybody else had any other business. All right. So we have one notice of motion here. Mayor Hamlin, would you like to just read your notice?
In fact, I didn't get a chance to flush this out a bit with staff, so I'm going to ask this be put over for 2 weeks.
Thank you. Any other notices of motion?
I have one.
Oh, you were just teasing us.
Oh. I'm just making this up on the fly, but in terms of the presentation we heard from the chair of the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay earlier, as you some may know, I was on the board of that institute, that nonprofit, as a volunteer for a couple of years, but I did resign last fall, so I wouldn't be in the position of conflict. So I'm just wanted to bring forward a motion that we do fund the ask of $10,000 that was made of us tonight. Thank you.
All right. Excellent. If there's no other notices of motion, adjournment. I see Councillor Potts was already, sorry, Councillor Baines, he was already flashing in front. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everyone. A lot of work.
I can do like a. Good night. You're blocking.